Chapter 633. The Tianhai Divine Empress walked up the divine path paved with white jade. The Mausoleum of Books was the continent's most unique place. Here, the laws and principles governing the operation of the world were greatly affected. Even supreme experts who surpassed the divine domain could not fly, only rely on their 2 feet to ascend. Of course, besides supreme experts like her, no one else could hope to take a step onto the divine path. This was Chen Chongqing's first time ascending the divine path of the Mausoleum of Books, even though his feet had not touched the divine path. This was a place countless cultivators of the world dreamed of being able to step onto. Back then, he had personally witnessed Sun Mei's death while attempting to intrude upon the divine path, and his feelings were even more profound. Now, as he gazed upon the divine path, so pure and holy that it did not seem to belong to the mortal world, he had no time to sigh in sorrow, only many questions. Why had the divine empress brought him here? Why had she left those words for divine General Han Qing beneath the divine path? The entire world knew that the armies of the great Zhou dynasty were under the command of 38 divine generals, and the vast majority of these 38 divine generals were loyal to the divine empress, except Divine General Han Qing, who was ranked first. Divine General Han Qing was the sole surviving member of the generation of divine generals in Taizong's reign, and he was even more senior than Divine General Fei Dian. When he had commanded the snowy plains, the divine empress had still been deep in the palace, so the two should not have had any old friendship. It was said that he had sworn his life to Emperor Taizong, and the reason he had guarded the mausoleum for more than 600 years was also because Emperor Taizong had left a will for him to guard the mausoleum. But from the divine empress's attitude, it seemed like she was very sure that he would obey her decree. Why was this? Divine General Han Qing had been infinitely close to the divine domain for many years and was publicly acknowledged as the strongest expert outside of the saints and the wind and rain. There was even a saying that if he had not guarded the Mausoleum of Books for 600 years, he might have already broken through that threshold and entered the divine domain. If he were said to be an expert the divine empress had arranged to guard the Mausoleum of Books, the divine empress's opponents would assuredly be shocked. Dark clouds gathered once more and the starlight vanished once more. In the gloomy darkness, the pure and holy white divine path seemed to gain some gloominess, making one feel rather cold. Just as Chen Chongqing was thinking these things, the divine path under the divine empress's feet became clear water flowing west, flowing into the distance. She had already reached the uppermost reaches. The upstream of the river was the highest point of the Mausoleum of Books, as well as the highest point of the capital. The Tianhai Divine Empress released her grip and threw him to the ground. With her hands held behind her, she walked to the edge of the divine path and gazed at the world beneath the Mausoleum of Books. The terrain here was even higher than the dew stage. When she looked at the world, she naturally looked down, the most natural way of looking down. It was because this was her world to begin with. There were very few people that could stand at the peak of the Mausoleum of Books. After Emperor Xian returned to the Sea of Stars, probably only the Divine Empress and the Pope had come. Chen Chongqing was the third person to arrive here, but he couldn't feel proud, because he was the one who was carried up, and he was in extreme pain at this moment, as if he could die at any moment. Back then, in the Mausoleum of Books, Chen Chongqing had personally witnessed Sun Mei pay with his life for the sake of reaching the peak of the Mausoleum of Books. Now, seeing her so casually arrive here, for some reason, he felt somewhat downcast and somewhat sad. Although he was depressed and sad, he still looked around, wanting to see the scenery clearly and remember it clearly. It was not because he had a thirst or curiosity towards the great Tao, but because he wanted to see this place in Senior Sun Mei's place. If the divine kingdom above the stars really could reunite with those departed people, he could tell them just what this place was like. The peak of the Mausoleum of Books was very ordinary and unremarkable, just like the peak of any random mountain, except that there was a stone plateau. But after all, this was the place that all cultivators dreamed of reaching, so it could not possibly be as ordinary as it seemed. Chen Chongqing's meridians were all severed, his sea of consciousness was without ripples, and he could not release his spiritual sense, but he could still sense the existence of some extremely profound and incomprehensible laws and principles on this stone plateau and the surrounding forest and rocks. Moreover, these supposedly formless and illusory laws actually seemed to have an almost real manifestation, though he was currently unable to see them. This mausoleum was called the Mausoleum of Books, because there were many heavenly tome monoliths on the mountain. Would the peak of the Mausoleum of Books also have a heavenly tome monolith? His gaze moved around the peak, ultimately resting on a pitch-black object deep within the stone plateau. Tonight was cloudy and starless, and the remaining lanterns in the capital were unable to illuminate the extremely high peak of the Mausoleum of Books. The scenery was very gloomy, impossible to see clearly. He could only judge from its shape that it was a stone monolith. Was this heavenly tome monolith, just like the last volume of the essay on the origin of the Tao, recorded on it the most profound and incomprehensible, and also the most extreme great Tao? Chen Chongqing thought this, yet he could not clearly see what was written on the stone monolith, or what was depicted on it. In the past 1,000 years, the people that have been able to truly understand this monolith do not exceed 5. The Tianhai Divine Empress stood at the edge of the divine path, not turning around. Chen Chongqing drew back his gaze and gazed at her back. He was currently sitting on the ground, looking up at her. From this angle, she seemed to be standing in the clouds, like she was in the night sky, incomparably lofty. What is my lady still waiting for? Kill me and everything will end. Chen Chongqing looked at her and said, The problem is that I don't want everything to end so quickly. The Tianhai Divine Empress gazed at the world beneath the Mausoleum of Books, from the farthest seashore all the way to the food stalls on the other side of the river outside the Mausoleum of Books. She said, How many people want you to die and how many people don't want you to die? Tonight, I can see all of them. I want to see. Chen Chongqing asked, Why do you want to see all of this? The Tianhai Divine Empress replied, Tonight, the people that want to save you are all my enemies, but wanting you to die doesn't mean that they're my people. If they appear tonight, even if they're separated by several thousand li, stealthily watching like a mouse, they all have ill intentions, so they're also my enemies. Why do you want to know who your enemies are? Normally, those fellows hide very well. I'll use this chance to find them and then kill them all. What if the entire world is your enemy? Then I'll kill half the entire world, and the remaining half will naturally not dare to be my enemy. Chen Chongqing fell silent. Only now did he understand what she wanted to do. Truly an awe-inspiring and terrifying woman. He sat on the ice-cold ground, leaning against the steps, gazing at that seemingly peaceful and beautiful world beneath the Mausoleum of Books. He thought to himself, just how many people will die tonight? This depends on how many people will appear in the capital today, or as she said, depends on how many people are quietly watching the capital from some place in the darkness. The Tianhai Divine Empress waved her sleeve, and a clear light flashed. A surface of light several feet in circumference appeared in the night sky in front of the divine path. This surface of light was neither far nor close, just right in front of the two of them, allowing them to see it extremely clearly. The scenes in the night sky constantly changed. Sometimes it was the Imperial Palace, sometimes it was the Orthodox Academy, sometimes it was the official road outside the capital, and sometimes it was the indistinct shadows in the darkness. The scenes changed too quickly, making it impossible for Chen Chongqing to see them clearly. He only knew that the people that would appear in these scenes would all be the people that she would kill tonight. Tonight was an ordinary night in the early autumn. But after tonight, tonight would assuredly be the most important night in the Orthodox era of the Great Zhou dynasty. Tonight, the people that had the right, or dared, to come to the capital to save Chen Chongqing were assuredly not ordinary people. Those people hidden in the darkness and paying attention to the situation in the capital were also assuredly not ordinary people. The dark clouds in the night sky grew thicker and thicker, the lights in the streets of the capital grew fewer and fewer. The world grew darker and the atmosphere more and more tense. One could faintly see some places in the capital stirring, but then it quickly calmed, ultimately returning to a deathly stillness. Suddenly, in the night sky to the northwest of the capital, a patch of light suddenly appeared. This patch of light was not dazzling. The thick dark clouds seemed to have been torn away by someone, revealing the vast sky of stars behind them. Behind the vast sky of stars was an even more crystalline splendor. Perhaps this was the moon that was rumored to only be seen by the demons? On that official road, the weeping willows on both sides swayed despite the lack of wind, as if bowing to the center of the road. There were no soldiers on the road, nor were there any carriages, only two people. A man wearing a bamboo hat was pushing a wheelchair, seemingly slowly making his way from the distant official road to the capital. Walking from the ruined Myriad Willows garden of Tianliang County to this place required a very long time. To the man in the wheelchair, he had already walked for 200 some years. 200 years ago, Emperor Xian could not attend court due to his illness and Tianhai formally took power. The man in the wheelchair had never again come to the capital, because he feared her. Tonight, he had finally come, probably because he knew that he did not have much time left in this world. Before death, all other fears would become much more indifferent. Two of the storms of the 8 directions, Zhu Luo and Guan Xinca, had come to the capital. As he gazed at the scene in front of the Divine Avenue, at Zhu Luo in the wheelchair, at the famed sword at his waist, Chen Chongqing very naturally recalled that battle in the rain in Xuanyang City. He remembered very clearly that Su Li had once humiliated Zhu Luo, saying that because he feared Tianhai, he did not dare take a single step into the capital. Zhu Luo had come to the capital tonight, perhaps with the resolve to die. Together with Guan Xinca, who was also a member of the Storms of the 8 Directions, although there were only 2 of them, their momentum surpassed that of a magnificent army. Guan Xinca's personality is too indifferent, lacking love or hate for the world. His heart is only in the stars, lonely to the point of heartache. His life ends here, and there's nothing to worry about. The Tianhai Divine Empress held her hands behind her back and gazed at the 2 people on the official road. Zhu Luo has been scared out of his wits by Su Li, yet he still dares to come to the capital. Perhaps there will be some variables, but in the end, he's already crippled. Coming is just sending himself to death. Zhu Luo and Guan Xinca were both supreme experts of the divine domain, ranked among the storms of the 8 directions, but in her evaluation, they were like clay chickens and pottery dogs. The scene in the night sky changed once more, and the light falling on the Divine Avenue also changed with it. Chen Chongqing's face was somewhat clouded by the light. His current mood was also like this, because the scene had already changed to the waterway to the southeast of the capital. This was the canal used to transport grain from Luoyang to the capital. Its surface was extremely wide, but according to the laws of the imperial court, it was strictly forbidden to sail at night. However, at this moment, an extremely exaggerated large ship was sailing across the canal. The large ship broke through the water, its surface surging with waves. Because of the darkness, the originally clear water of the canal became somewhat dark blue, yet it could not conceal the dark red in the water. Yesterday, I went to Beijing to participate in Tencent Pictures' press conference. It was a hurried day, and the flight back and forth was truly exhausting. Choosing the Heavens is about to begin filming, and I mainly want to report this to everyone. It's just like how Chen Chongqing viewed the scenery in the Mausoleum of Books, and also wanted to report to Sun Mei. Hey, why does this analogy feel somewhat off? Pretend I didn't say anything. Chapter 634. At sunrise, the flowers on the river were redder than fire. It was still late at night, but there was a bright red flower quietly blooming in the sweeping blue waves. there were two people standing at the bow of the ship. One was a man dressed in a scholar's robe, with a small red flower on his little finger that was unknown if it was real or made of silk. The other was a Taoist nun whose age could not be determined. Her appearance could be considered beautiful, but there was a hint of loathsome hostility between her brows. The horsetail whisk on her arm exuded a terrifying aura of nirvanic extermination, and it also gave off a somewhat disharmonious feeling. Chen Chongqing recognized the Taoist nun and knew that she was Wuqiong Bai of the Storms of the Eight Directions. In the 10,000-li journey from Mount Han to the capital, he had also seen that little red flower. Since that scholar was standing at Wuqiong Bai's side, he was naturally another of the Storms of the Eight Directions, Bi Yanghong. When Wuqiong Bai had infiltrated the capital and prepared to kill Xianyuan Po in the Orthodox Academy, she had been forced into retreat by Su Li's letter. Tonight, however, she and her husband had entered the capital together. From a certain perspective, they had come to save him. Chen Chongqing's current rather complex state of mind was precisely because of this. This idiot actually dares to come to the capital. The Tianhai Divine Empress gazed at the large warship in the image and expressionlessly said, "A single finger is enough to pinch it to death. But her man isn't bad, at least worth 3 of her." Chen Chongqing didn't know what to say. Whether it was the two men on the official road to the northwest or the husband and wife in the canal to the southwest, they were like gods in the eyes of all the cultivators of the world, but in the Tianhai Divine Empress's words, besides Bi Yanghong, there was not a single person that could make her feel the slightest bit wary. But she was still the Tianhai Divine Empress. Chen Chongqing's feelings were obviously different from hers. Of the 8 storms, 4 had already arrived. Tonight in the capital, there was bound to be a storm, the sky shaking and the earth moving. This was just a grand opening. Following that, countless people appeared one after another. Many troops suddenly appeared on the cobweb-like roads around Jingdo that extended in all directions. Those people seemed to have been hiding in the darkness, waiting for the 4 peerless experts to appear. Then, they would suddenly tear through the darkness and appear in front of the entire world, just like they had been doing for the past 200 years. The official roads led from the various states and counties of the Great Zhou dynasty to the capital. These people had always lived in those provinces far from the capital. There was one similarity between them: they were all surnamed Chen, and they were all descendants of Emperor Taizong. Chen Chongqing looked at the constantly changing scene and silently counted in his heart. He confirmed that there were currently 15 caravans heading towards the capital in the darkness of the night. There were not many people from the princely estates of the various provinces, but they were all experts. The experts of the princely estates walking around the carriage were all at least at the upper level of star condensation. The Chen imperial clan had practically vanished for over 200 years, and especially for the last 20 years. Tonight, they'd finally revealed their extremely deep and concealed strength. 15 prefectures, 15 princes, 15 imperial carriages. In the darkness of the night, dust gradually rose from the official road. Like wind and cloud crossing, it swept through and came to the surroundings of Jingdo. The capital of the Great Zhou dynasty did not have city walls, but it did have city gates and city gate guards, which were led by the divine general of the East, Su Shiji. However, how could the city gate department stop the carriages of the princes from the various prefectures and counties? Who knew which deputy general in the city gate department was a disciple of which prince, or which officer's father was still a senior official in the Prince of Luling's estate? Several city gates exploded with fierce ripples of qi. Sword glows could faintly be seen, and then they quickly vanished. The princes of the Chen clan had finally returned to the capital that they had been separated from for so long. Those experts accompanying the carriages of the princely estates stared at everything in the darkness with determined expressions, ready to welcome the suppression of the Great Zhou dynasty's army at any time. If one had to describe these experts, one could use one phrase: heroes of the world. They had sufficient confidence in their own cultivation and strength, and they also believed that what they were doing was correct. Heroes gathered in the capital, intending to behead the demon empress on this autumn night, throwing away their heads, spilling their blood, dying for their country? The Tianhai divine empress gazed at those scenes in the darkness, making no attempt to conceal her ridicule. The history books of tens of thousands of years from now might write this. This truly is an absurd matter. Chen Changxing gazed at those fervent experts on the screen. After a moment of silence he asked, "Then how should it be written?" In the 21st year of the great Zhou dynasty's orthodoxy, 17 rebellious princes entered the capital and were all wiped out. The Tianhai divine empress indifferently said. With a light wave of her sleeve, she seemed to want to brush all of this into ashes. Chen Changxing thought to himself, where are the other 2 rebellious princes? Several hundred li from the capital, in Luoyang, there were not many clouds tonight. The numerous stars shone as usual, illuminating the world, whether it was the stinking alleys where the poor resided or the vermilion gates of the northern city. The gate of the princely estate was slowly pushed open, and the Prince of Xiang walked out. He moved his fat body with great difficulty down the stone step. With the help of his subordinates, he spent half a day climbing onto the carriage that was not very tall. Just this simple action caused him to gasp for breath. Sitting down, the fat on his abdomen flowed down from his bright yellow belt, making him feel rather uncomfortable. The Prince of Xiang stretched out his hand and untied the bright yellow belt around his waist. As he rubbed that fat, he suddenly felt a deep sorrow in his heart. He had lived in Luoyang for so many years. In order to stop his mother from paying attention to him, he had done his utmost to eat and drink. He had become so fat that if he ascended to the throne in the future, how could he receive the worship of all the officials with his current appearance? But fortunately, he was not like his 7th brother, who, in order to feign madness, would actually grab donkey dung and stuff it into his own mouth. Pah, that was truly a madman! Everyone in the princely estate, whether concubines or subordinates, walked out and kneeled on the long street, saying in unison, "Congratulations, Your Highness, on your return to the capital." The Prince of Xiang looked at the crowd and sighed. What's there to congratulate? Who knows if I'll be able to come back alive? The street outside the princely estate became absolutely silent. Those favored concubines looked at each other in dismay. Some of them even began to weep in grief, though it was impossible to tell how much of their feelings were sincere. The Prince of Xiang waved his hand in annoyance. "You're already starting to weep? Fine, fine, if I don't come back, all of you can commit suicide and go accompany this prince." At these words, there was a moment of silence outside the princely estate, and then there was a great burst of weeping. This time, it was very clear that those concubines and subordinates were crying very sincerely and in extreme grief. A similar scene was taking place on the street of Jiangnan Province's provincial capital, but it was not completely the same. The Prince of Zhongshan walked through the kneeling crowd, his pale face devoid of expression. Only a hint of madness could be faintly seen in the depths of his bloodshot eyes. As he walked, he left behind a clear footprint on the ground outside the princely estate, a footprint of blood. It was like he had walked through a sea of blood. In reality, the Prince of Zhongshan's estate was already a sea of blood. Those subordinates sent by the imperial court were already lying in pools of blood, their heads separated from their bodies. All of them had been personally killed by the Prince of Zhongshan. Only one person had not been killed. It was the chief eunuch, who was currently being forced to kneel behind the gate of the princely estate. This chief eunuch was already very old, his face covered in wrinkles. He clearly knew that he was about to die, but he still maintained a calm expression. He gazed at the Prince of Zhongshan, who was about to board his carriage, and said, "Your Highness, since you have not killed me, presumably you are not willing to completely fall out with the Empress. The journey to the capital is long, so there is no harm in your Highness taking your time and observing the situation." This was an extremely ingenious way of persuasion. He first explained the Prince of Zhongshan's situation and then suggested a plan for the Prince of Zhongshan, and it was truly a wise and prudent plan. The Prince of Zhongshan ignored the old eunuch and jumped onto the carriage, saying, "I'm not killing you because I want to leave a path of retreat, but because I want you to have a taste of what I've felt over the years." The old eunuch paled at these words, no longer able to maintain his composure. Escorted by several dozen elites of the princely estate, the carriage of the Prince of Zhongshan's estate entered the darkness and headed for the capital. Only the prince's bone-chilling voice continued to resound through the street. "Don't let this old dog die. Don't give him rice to eat, only give him donkey dung to eat. Remember, it has to be fresh, the freshest." Despite the dark winds and rain, they met. 17 rebellious princes entered the capital. As he gazed at the scene in the darkness, Chen Chongqing knew that he was witnessing with his own eyes the most important event of the continent after the tragedy of the Orthodox Academy. He was the cause of this event, or perhaps the trigger. When he thought about how many people would die tonight and how many more people would become destitute and homeless, dying in the chaos of war, his mood became somewhat agitated and uneasy. His chest felt vexed and he couldn't help but cough. With each cough, the pain deepened and his face grew paler and paler. This preposterous drama is very interesting. Watch a bit more before you die. Don't die too early. The Tianhai Divine Empress listened to his coughs but did not turn around, her face expressionless as she spoke. With these words, Chen Chongqing suddenly realized that he could move. He knew what she meant. He was wondering if there was anything else he could do. He still had Su Li's letter in his bosom, and he still had many swords in his sheath, and he still had the heavenly tome monoliths and many more. Yet her figure was so lofty. It was right under the night sky, yet it seemed to be above the night sky. He thrust his hand into his bosom. He did not take out the letter, but a small porcelain bottle. The small porcelain bottle was filled with medicine. He poured out several dozen pills from the bottle. Without distinguishing them, he threw them into his mouth and chewed them like candy, crunching and crunching. After arriving at the peak of the mausoleum of books, the Divine Empress had not turned her head to look at him. Only when she heard the sound did she turn her head to glance at him. Chen Chongqing did not care about her gaze. Next, he removed the golden needles from his finger and pierced them deeply into several dangerous qi openings on his neck. His face grew even paler and his body began to tremble, as if he could not withstand the autumn wind. As time passed, the trembling gradually came to an end. 2 abnormal smears of blood appeared on his face. One by one, the Divine Empress's enemies revealed themselves in the darkness. It was not because this was their best chance, but because this was their last chance. If she was allowed to kill Chen Chongqing and change fate for the 3rd time in 1,000 years, then perhaps no one would ever be able to ask her to step down from the throne of the Great Zhou. Peerless experts that lived in seclusion, the princes of the imperial clan that had endured for many years, and the heroes of the world that had swallowed their anger, all gathered in the capital. But this was not all, because the world was very large and the Divine Empress still had many enemies. On the official road to the south, figures gradually appeared. No one from the Mountly Sword sect came, no one from Holy Maiden Peak came, no one from Scholatry Manor came, no one from the Longevity sect came, but the head of the Qiushan clan and the old guardian had come, the old lady of the Mutuo clan had come, and the head of the Wu clan renowned for his deep foresight had also come. 3 of the 4 great clans had come, but what of the Tang clan? Chapter 635. Today, the Tradition Academy was very lively. First, Chen Chongqing disappeared. The army of the imperial court and the orthodoxy cavalry confronted each other. Then, Chen Chongqing returned. Not too long after, he disappeared again. In the autumn forest outside the academy walls, countless screams and terrifying ripples of qi could be heard. However, when the orthodoxy cavalry, Tang 36, and the others rushed over, they saw nothing but corpses and blood. The army of the imperial court was still surrounding the Tradition Academy. From the main street outside of 100 Blossom Street to the walls of the imperial palace, people were everywhere. Occasionally, traces of conflict could be seen on the street and the walls. Tang 36 stood in front of the gate of the Tradition Academy and looked into the night. His handsome face no longer had the usual nonchalance. It was extremely serious. While Su Moyu was comforting the teachers and students, Zheshio and the disciples of South Stream Temple were patrolling the area. The gate to the Orthodox Academy was heavily guarded by the Orthodoxy cavalry. Logically speaking, no one would dare to attack from here, but Tang 36 was keenly aware that the Orthodox Academy would not be able to obtain peace today. Something else was bound to happen. There was a tea house by the alley in front of the Orthodox Academy. During the all-school martial exhibition last autumn, Mao Chuyu and Daoist Siyuan, two prefects of the Orthodoxy, would often drink tea there to ensure that the situation did not get out of control. However, it was very obvious that the Li Palace was assuredly in a storm tonight, so these two prefects of the Orthodoxy would definitely not be in the tea house. Suddenly, there was a sound in the tea house. It was the sound of someone coming down the stairs. Someone was coming downstairs. Tang 36 squinted his eyes. The feeling of uneasiness grew stronger and stronger. He felt like he had heard these footsteps somewhere before. The wooden door of the tea house was open from the inside, and the tea house owner respectfully sent someone out. He was a very handsome man. His eyes and brows were similar to Tang 36, but he was obviously much older. Maybe he was already middle-aged, but he was still able to charm countless women in the world. The Orthodoxy cavalry in front of the academy instantly tensed up. Tonight, the armies of the imperial court guarded the perimeter while the Orthodoxy cavalry guarded the interior. It would be very difficult for anyone to approach the Orthodox Academy, yet who could have imagined that right between these two great powers, someone would be drinking tea in the tea house in front of the Orthodox Academy for an entire night? When he walked out of this tea house, he had broken through the surveillance of the imperial court and arrived directly at the Orthodox Academy. Tang 36 looked at the man, and the emotions on his face became extremely complicated. He knew that someone would come, but he didn't expect that it would be him. This man came from Wenshui, the Tang's second master. "Second uncle, why are you here?" Tang 30 looked at the man and asked with a smile, but in his heart, he was extremely vigilant. The situation in the capital was so tense that he knew that someone from the Wenshui clan would assuredly come, but he had never expected it to be this person. He didn't want his family to send this person over. The Wenshui Tangs were the head of the 4 great clans and possessed incomparably powerful strength. The name of the Tang Old Master could frighten half the people of the world to death, while at the same time, the other half would try to curry favor with him. However, the Tang Old Master's 3 sons did not have very great reputations, and they were all far inferior to Tang 36. This was especially true of the Tang's second master. Many people did not even know of his existence. The people of Wenshui City knew that every time a foreign traveler mentioned Tang 36's deeds in the capital and sighed over his hedonistic ways, the people of Wenshui City would say with extreme disdain that compared to his second uncle, he wasn't a hedonistic at all. If they wanted to know how the word prodigal was written, they just had to look at the Tang's second master when he was young. But this was still an illusion. Only the direct descendants of the Tang clan knew just how frightening a person the second master was. In the Tang clan, the second master had the highest talent in cultivation, but he had also wasted it the most thoroughly. The current principal of the Heavenly Tao Academy, Zhuang Jihuan, had gone to Wenshui as a guest 10-some years ago. After meeting this person, he had once commented, "To waste such astonishing talent, this sort of person is truly too frightening." These words seemed unreasonable, but they were actually very reasonable. If one did not care about anything, one would not revere anything. This sort of person was the most frightening of people. Tang 36 was the sole grandson of the Tang clan and had been raised in the palm of the Tang clan, but he was not even willing to face his second uncle. After coming to the capital, he was not even willing to think that he still had this uncle. Tonight, the Tang's second master came to the capital and went downstairs. This meant that the Tang clan had gone downstairs. They were going to use the cruelest attitude, the most merciless methods, to enter this war. This was the thing that Tang 36 wanted to see the least. "What does the clan want to do?" he asked again. The Tang's second master waved his paper fan as he took in the sights of the Orthodox Academy. He seemed very much like a hedonistic young master, but the words he spoke could never come from the mouth of a hedonistic young master. "It's impossible to stay out of it, so I have to do something. I felt that this matter was rather interesting, so I came." Tang 36 asked, "Is grandfather not worried that second uncle will go crazy?" The Tang's second master closed his paper fan with a clap and held it in his hand. He smiled at him and said, "In such a chaotic situation, besides a madman like me, who can resolve it?" Tang 36's expression did not change, but his heart sank. Whether it was his father or his third uncle who came to the capital, he was confident that he could convince them to prioritize Chen Chongqing's safety, because the Wenshui clan probably did not know that Chen Chongqing did not have many days left to live. Thus, if Chen Chongqing could survive this storm, he would become the strongest successor to the throne of the Great Zhou. To the Tang clan, this was an extremely good thing. But the one who came was the Tang's second master. He was keenly aware that his second uncle had never cared about anyone's life or death. The capital is very large. "Sir does not necessarily have to come to the Orthodox Academy," Tang 36 said. The Tang's second master calmly gazed at him and said, "You are my Tang clan's only weakness in the capital. Before I do anything, I naturally have to take you away." Tang 36 stared straight into his eyes and said, "Sir also said that the capital is in a state of chaos. I am the superintendent of the Orthodox Academy, so how could I leave at a time like this?" The Tang's second master began to laugh. His laugh was very unique. It seemed especially sunny and cheerful. His mouth opened especially wide and made no attempt to conceal it, but there was no sound. A noiseless grin could be naive, it could also be innocent, and at times it could also be very frightening. "Ah, Superintendent." The Tang's second master's smile faded, and he expressionlessly said, "Have you still not had enough fun?" Hearing the word fun, Tang 36 very naturally recalled the conversation he had with Chen Chongqing on the great banyan tree of the Orthodox Academy last autumn, and then he recalled the night before the conflict between the Orthodox Academy and the Tianhai clan broke out. Luoluo was forced to move out of this place and live in the Li Palace's green leaf world. In the eyes of the elders, everything the youths of the Orthodox Academy had done for the Orthodox Academy had always been for fun. Tang 36 thought of many things, but the expression on his face did not change. At some point, the hand behind his back had stealthily made a gesture. The wind blowing through the darkness of the Orthodox Academy was suddenly tinged with the stench of blood. It was like some vicious beast had at some point sneaked into the field, and was ready to unleash its most powerful attack at any moment. Several dozen clear and chilling sword intents burst forth from the grass by the lake. In just a few moments, they could form into an awe-inspiring sword array. A hint of derision suddenly appeared on the Tang's second master's face. At some point, he had already arrived at Tang 36's side, his right hand resting on the back of his neck. Tang 36 felt that this hand was exceptionally cold and also somewhat sticky. It did not feel like a snake, but rather like moss on a rock in a pond. His heart sank. He knew that his second uncle was very frightening, but he had not expected his second uncle to be this powerful. In front of him, he had no ability to resist. The Tang's second master gazed at the great banyan tree in the darkness and asked, "You're that wolf cub?" Zheshio walked out from behind the great banyan tree. His eyes were blood-red and his body exuded a ruthless chi. The arms that were exposed from his short sleeves were covered in long hair. He was already prepared to transform. The disciples of South Stream Temple also emerged from the darkness. Gripping their longswords, they looked at the middle-aged man restraining Tang 36, somewhat nervous and somewhat perplexed. This middle-aged man was probably from the Tang clan. For some reason, Tang 36 had secretly sent out a signal for everyone to prepare to attack. Yet before Zhixiu or the disciples of South Stream Temple had time to do anything, the middle-aged man had casually taken control of the situation. Zhixiu glanced at Tang 36. Tang 36's expression did not change. He continued to stare at Zhixiu, sending a very clear message. He did not want to leave the Orthodox Academy, especially at a time like this. Zhixiu's gaze shifted to the Tang second master's face, and he took a step forward. I very much dislike that sort of gaze of yours, because it's too primitive, too barbaric, too uncultured. The Tang second master looked at Zhixiu and said, "Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't mind crushing all the bones in your body, but out of respect for my nephew, I won't do anything to you. But if you take another step forward, or if these girls from South Stream Temple raise their swords again, then I can only kill him." Even now, Zhixiu and the disciples of South Stream Temple were not particularly clear on the situation. They thought, what use is there in restraining Tang 36? Do you think you can use him to threaten us? And then, they heard their opponent very calmly say these words, so calm that although they found it impossible to believe the contents of these words, they had no choice but to believe them. "He's your nephew," Yi Xiaolian said to the Tang second master like he was a monster. The Tang second master faintly smiled at her and said, "He's my most beloved nephew." Tang 36 suddenly asked, "Second uncle, have you always wanted me to die? Where did these shameful words come from?" The Tang second master gently said to him, "This is the old master's order. I have full authority to handle the affairs of the capital. No matter who you are, as long as you do not obey my orders, I can kill you on the spot. This matter concerns the great undertaking of the clan for tens of thousands of generations, so a few sacrifices are unavoidable." Tang 36 began to laugh. "I am the sole grandson of the Tang clan. If you kill me, how will you explain it to the clan?" The Tang second master truly did seem troubled. After thinking for a very long time, he very seriously said, "Then, I'll just have another child." Tang 36 no longer laughed. He calmly looked at him and said, "Have another child? It seems that second uncle really does want me to die." The Tang second master faintly smiled. "For the sake of the Tang clan, your third uncle and I have never had a child. We love and pamper you, but we don't want to pamper you into a brat. Don't be willful. There's still one more chapter at 8 in the evening. Truly, 2 updates after so long." Chapter 636. The words devilish brat made Tang 36 think of Xian Yuanpo. He once more smiled, but this smile was rather bitter. He was still in the Orthodox Academy, but he was already beginning to long for the people that were not in the Orthodox Academy, as well as his days in the Orthodox Academy. These days were truly incomparably beautiful and worthy of remembrance. Alas, after tonight they would be gone forever. "I understand," he said to the Tang second master, "I'll go with you." The Tang second master calmly gazed at him, then once more soundlessly laughed. His mouth opened very wide, his appearance rather comical. After some time, he finally restrained his smile and said, "This is very good." After saying these 4 words, he brought Tang 36 out of the gate of the Orthodox Academy. Zhixiu and the South Stream Temple disciples could do nothing but watch as their figures vanished into the darkness. The Tang second master brought Tang 36 out of 100 Flowers Lane and onto the main street. An unmarked carriage was already waiting for them on the street. At this sight, the elites of the Imperial Guard watching over the Orthodox Academy in the dark street were a little restless, but they quickly quieted down. Whether it was the orthodoxy cavalry or the troops of the imperial court, none of them seemed to see that carriage, didn't see the Tang's second master bring Tang 36 onto the carriage. The Wenshui Tangs were such a terrifying existence. Although on the surface, it had been many years since their faction had been able to enter the capital, they still possessed an unimaginable influence. This was because the only thing in the world that could truly connect with the gods was not faith or power, but money. The carriage advanced through the capital city under the cover of night. The wheels of the carriage, which were imbued with formations, did not make a sound no matter whether it ran over the limestone or red brick ground. It looked like a ghost. Even the flying carriage, that Princess Ping's flying carriage, was pulled by a snow-white Pegasus in the sky, was not as fast as this seemingly ordinary carriage. The person sitting in this carriage could not feel the slightest jolt, but they did not find it very comfortable. This person was Tang 36. He asked, "Just what does the clan want to do?" The Tang's second master replied, "You'll know in a little while." As the carriage traveled too quickly, the wind blew up the curtains of the carriage window. Tang 36 gazed at the constantly retreating street, at those tightly shut shops, and silently pondered. In the deepest part of the market the car stopped. This was the headquarters of the Heavenly Fragrance Market. Before walking through the door leading underground, Tang 36 stopped and asked the Tang's second master, "You want to take over the businesses of the Pavilion of Heavenly Secrets in the capital?" The Tang's second master slightly raised his brows, apparently rather surprised that he had been able to guess the clan's true goal in such a short amount of time. Even if the situation on the continent changes dramatically, is the Pavilion of Heavenly Secrets that easy to deal with? What if the Elder of Heavenly Secrets doesn't come to the capital? If he wanted to deal with the Pavilion of Heavenly Secrets, he would first have to deal with the existence of the Elder of Heavenly Secrets. Even if the Tianhai Divine Empress invited the Elder of Heavenly Secrets to the capital to help, how could the Tang clan be certain that the Elder of Heavenly Secrets would die? It had to be known that this old man had the ability to see through the mysteries of heaven and was the leader of the storms of the 8 directions. The Elder of Heavenly Secrets will not come to the capital. The Tang's second master walked into the gloomy tunnel, not even turning his head. Because he is about to die. Tang 36, who had just lifted his foot, stopped again. He was extremely shocked. The Elder of Tianji was going to die? Why? Amongst the experts of the divine domain in the present world, he and His Holiness the Pope are the oldest, but they have never been able to conceal themselves, so they cannot escape the 4 words of birth, old age, sickness, and death. The Tang's second master did not stop. He calmly continued. In Mount Han, he exchanged blows with the Demon Lord and was injured, speeding up this process. Tang 36 followed and asked, "Then what about the Divine Empress? Are all of you so sure that she will lose?" The Tang's second master replied, "The Tianhai Empress's strength relies on the word ruthlessness. Chen Chongqing has already been in the capital for more than 2 years, but she has still not touched him. Even if she kills him now, it's already too late." The heavy metal gate slowly closed behind the pair, isolating the capital from the outside world. The underground space here was very large, but it was not gloomy. Night pearls and jade flames shone everywhere, but it was also not quiet, because there were people everywhere. Several hundred accountants were sitting at their desks, copying something or calculating something. A small mountain of scrolls was piled on the table in front of each of them. "What are they doing?" Tang 36 asked. The Tang's second master asked, "What does our Tang clan most deserve to be revered for?" Tang 36 could not think of it. The Wenshui Tangs were the wealthiest clan on the continent. Not even the Pavilion of Heavenly Secrets could surpass them. Before the Chun imperial clan established the Great Zhou dynasty, the Tang clan was already the Tang clan. The Tang clan did all kinds of business. Armaments, magical artifacts, provisions, crystals, mines. If one had to say what was most worthy of revering, could it be money? As they walked into the deepest room, the three chief stewards of the heavenly fragrance market saw Tang 36 walk in behind the Tang's second master, their faces rather unnatural. In this past year, they had always been concealing what they had been doing from him. This was the heavenly fragrance market, a hole that Tang 36 had ripped open in the capital last autumn by borrowing the new life of the Orthodox Academy. His family had already secretly taken over everything, and he didn't know anything at all. While he was handling the affairs of the Orthodox Academy, he also managed the heavenly fragrance market. He naturally used the stewards sent by the clan, so the heavenly fragrance market very naturally became the property of the clan. Yes, he was the most favored grandson of the Wenshui Tangs, but on a major matter like this, he still had no right to speak. But in the minds of these stewards, Tang 36 would assuredly be the head of the Tang clan many years from now. Although they were not betraying, it was no different from betraying, and they inevitably felt somewhat uneasy. The Tang clan will always be the Tang clan's Tang clan, not any one person's Tang clan. The Tang's second master took a sip of tea from the teapot on the table, then walked up to the wall. With his back to the three stewards he said, "If you do this well, the Tang clan will not treat you unfairly." The three chief stewards glanced at Tang 36 and whispered their assent. The Tang's second master lightly flicked the teapot, and a map 7 feet long and wide dropped down from above, blocking the front of the wall. This map was made from the toughest golden silk and used the finest southern ink. The ink was probably mixed with some black gold, and under the illumination of the night pearls and jade fire, it was extremely clear. This was a map of the capital, drawn with exceptional detail. Whether it was the Imperial Palace, the Li Palace, or even the most ordinary residences, nothing was overlooked. The Tang's second master held the teapot in his left hand and gazed at the map. A satisfied expression appeared on his face as he said, "Report." The three chief stewards lined up, opened the thick dossiers in their bosoms, and began to make their report. Jingyuan confirmed, strength reduced by 323. Red House South Street confirmed, strength as initial data. North of Achievement unable to confirm. On the day of Taizong's death, too many palace maids were sacrificed, so the Inchi might have interfered. White Paper District confirmed, strength increased by 141. Chapter 637. With each statement from the three chief stewards, the corresponding places on the map on the wall would brighten, and the degree of brightness varied. Tang 36 stood in the corner and listened, his expression growing more and more solemn. He could not understand the data in these reports, but he could sense the atmosphere. The Tang's second master gazed at the gradually brightening spots on the map. He was not at all nervous, nor did he grow more relaxed as time passed. To him, this seemed like a very ordinary job. After some time, the reports of the three chief stewards came to an end. The Tang's second master looked at the map, his brow creasing. Somewhat dissatisfied, he said, "The progress is still a little slow." The clattering of the abacus beads could be heard from outside the room. The sound of several hundred abacuses being pulled simultaneously mixed together was truly not pleasant to listen to. A chief steward said, "In this year of preparation, we can only obtain a few rough numbers. The true calculations will only begin tonight. It's truly impossible to go any faster." The Tang's second master looked at the accounts outside the room, their heads bent over their tables and constantly pulling out the beads on their abacuses. He said, "At most, we still have an hour." The chief steward replied, "I will keep an eye on them." Just keeping an eye on them isn't enough. The Tang's second master stared into the chief steward's eyes and said, "All of you go as well. In addition, give me an abacus." In a short while, the abacus and a large pile of files were brought in. The Tang's second master ignored Tang 36, standing in the corner. His right hand flipped through the files while his left hand constantly plucked at the beads on the abacus. Every once in a while, he would pause to make a mark on the file. Compared to the accountants outside the room, his speed did not seem particularly fast, but each of his movements was exceptionally clear. The speed at which his right hand flipped through the scrolls and the speed at which his left hand calculated, combined almost perfectly with a rhythm that was difficult to explain. Looking at the small mountain of scrolls, he quickly finished calculating. A subordinate brought in a second pile of files from outside the room. Not long after, he finished calculating again. Only now did the Tang's second master take a moment to rest. He picked up the teapot that had long since gone cold and slowly took a sip. To carry out such a vast amount of calculations in such a short amount of time caused his face to turn somewhat green. This was because he had consumed too much of his spiritual sense. If Su Yorong were to use the fated star plate to perform her calculations here, she should be able to calculate twice as fast as I am. The Tang's second master tiredly set down the teapot and said, "But if Wang Po were still our clan's accountant, there would be no need for me to work so hard." At this time, there were only him and Tang 36 in the room, so these words were naturally meant for Tang 36. Our clan does business, and when doing business we can't suffer losses. When the old master had Wang Po leave Wenshui, this business deal was too much of a loss. Tang 36 knew that second uncle was warning him not to drag down the family business for Chun Chong Xing and the Tradition Academy. When Wang Po left Wenshui, wasn't it because you, second uncle, were narrow-minded and disliked him, so you did everything you could to force him away? He looked at the Tang's second master and mocked. The Tang's second master calmly gazed at him and said, "Shut your mouth. I still have many things to do today, so I'm not in the mood to play these childish games with you." The results of the calculations of hundreds of accountants were continuously gathered in the small room, and then arranged into the simplest sentences. Whether a certain place in the capital could be confirmed or not, and how strong it was, were just these two matters. More and more dots of light appeared on the map on the wall, gradually linking together into a line. Ultimately, it became an indecipherable design. Tang 36 stood in the corner, gazing at this design. He faintly recalled that when he was small, the old master had held him on his knee and told him stories from long ago, and he seemed to have mentioned something related, but what was it? Finally, all the calculations were completed. The annoying sound of the beads clashing against each other outside the room was no longer heard. Only the extremely tired sighs of the accountants and the painful groans of their arms could be heard. Tang 36 even saw that two accountants even fainted because of the mental exhaustion. The Tang's second master once more walked up to the stone wall and gazed at the design on the map. His two brows slightly rose as he took out an object from his sleeve. Countless rays of light shot out from this object and fell on the map of the capital, also forming a design. The two designs overlapped one another, their outlines roughly the same, but there were some minute differences and also differences in brightness. "Has it changed greatly?" the Tang's second master asked. Tang 36 froze, thinking, "I've never seen these two designs, so how can I know the answer? And change, what sort of change is this? It's already been 1,000 years, so the change naturally won't be too small." An elderly voice rose from the shadows of the room. An elder dressed in a cotton jacket appeared there. Tang 36 looked at the elder and asked in shock, "Great Guardian, you're also here?" The elder nodded and walked to the Tang's second master's side. Gazing at the two designs on the map that seemed about to merge together, he said, "Fortunately, it can be resolved." Tang 36 could no longer suppress his curiosity. Walking over, he asked, "Just what sort of map is this?" "These two are both imperial designs of the capital. The one calculated tonight is of the present, while the one second master just took out is from 1,000 years ago," the old guardian from the Wenshui Tang clan explained. The Tang's second master replied, "The changes of the capital over the past 1,000 years are contained in these two maps. This is history." Hearing this, Tang 36 once more gazed at the designs on the wall, and he naturally felt many different things. Only our Tang clan can see the changes of this period in history, because our Tang clan exists in history. At least in the history of the capital, we have been around longer than anyone else, even longer than the Churn imperial clan. Thus, our Tang clan has more than enough reason to return to the capital. You must understand the necessity of reverence for history. The Tang's second master looked at him and said, "If you don't even understand this, how can you be worthy of the surname Tang?" These words were an answer to the question he had asked Tang 36 at the very beginning. What did the Tang clan deserve the most reverence for? It was not money that could allow one to ascend to the gods, nor was it the countless noble clans, monasteries, and ministries that spread across the continent or even deep into Xuelao City. It was the incomparably long history that the Tang clan possessed as the head of the four great clans. Logically speaking, Tang 36 should have had some sort of reaction to these words, but he was thinking about something else, and then he thought of something else. His face suddenly paled. He remembered what these two designs on the map, 1,000 years apart, were. Yes, it was the imperial design. Just as the Great Guardian had said. Very few people in the world knew of the imperial design's existence, but when he was a child, he had heard about it while sitting on the old master's knee. It was the greatest secret of the great Zhou dynasty's capital, and also a Taoist array of terrifying power. Just what did the Wenshui clan want to do? He gazed at the map of the capital on the wall, countless waves surging in his mind. Was there a need to make such a ruckus tonight? The Tang's second master and the Great Guardian were also looking at the map. All the lines on these two imperial design maps, separated by 1,000 years, pointed to a certain place on the map. It was at the place where the gazes of the three people in the room rested. A little north of the center of the capital was the imperial palace. The Tang's second master indifferently said, "As expected, the array pivot is there." The Great Guardian sighed, so the array pivot was still there. After Taizu ascended to the throne in front of the mausoleum of books, he began to modify the imperial design. Later on, Taizong and Emperor Xian did not stop either. The Tang's second master looked at the map of the capital and said, "The place that was modified the most, besides the North Li of Achievement and the Luo Canal, was the array pivot deep within the imperial palace." The Great Guardian gazed at the bright specks of light on the second imperial design and said, "It now seems that those rumors from back then were all true." Taizong built the Lingyan Pavilion so that the array pivot, which was the most important and also the most vulnerable to attack, could be transformed into the most dangerous heavenly slaughter array, specifically aimed at experts of the divine domain. The Tang's second master said, "Father said that if Emperor Taizong really did manage to cultivate the heavenly slaughter array, experts of the divine domain who wanted to force their way in would only be met with death." The Great Guardian silently gazed at that place for a very long time, then said, "I will try to see if I can sneak in." Tang 36 was shocked again when he heard this conversation from behind. The Great Guardian's cultivation was unfathomable. Many years ago, he was only half a step away from the divine domain. He was the Wenshui Tang clan's last trump card besides the old master, and now he was also going to move? Chapter 638. The Tang's second master said nothing. The Great Guardian said, "Tonight, Xue Xingchuan will assuredly remain in the palace to oversee the imperial design. This person's qi and blood are flourishing, and he is at his peak. If I fight him, I don't have much of a chance of victory. Moreover, the Divine Empress is highly likely to give the Frost God's spear to him. If this is true, then he has an ability infinitely close to the divine domain." The meaning of these words was very clear. If Xue Xingchuan held the Frost God's spear, then only an expert of the divine domain could defeat him. With the Tang clan's 1,000-year resources on the continent, they really might be able to invite an expert of the divine domain to act, but the heavenly slaughter array in the imperial palace specifically targeted experts of the divine domain. It seemed like an unbreakable situation. Only if the Great Guardian took the risk could they find a sliver of hope. The Tang's second master continued to say nothing. The great guardian said, "That guardian from the Qiushan clan is weaker than me. The Prince of Xiang is a crafty old fox, and he will definitely not rush to the capital before the outcome is decided, and the Prince of Zhongshan is a madman." No. The Tang's second master shook his head. "Our Tang clan will always provide information, judgment, and money. Until the last moment, we will not send a single person. Who will break the heavenly slaughter array? If we can't enter the imperial palace, even if the old master personally comes to the capital, he will not be able to obtain the imperial design." That person said to the old master that he would resolve this matter. "This is a matter of great importance. This matter of trusting another has nothing to do with trust, only ability." The Tang's second master continued, "That person even makes me feel fear, so if he says he can do it, then he can definitely do it." He did not explicitly say who that person was. Tang 36 naturally had no way of knowing, but for some reason, he was very sure that the person he spoke of was Chen Chongqing's teacher, the former principal of the Orthodox Academy, Shang Xingzhou. Since everyone's goal tonight is to invite the Divine Empress back to the Sea of Stars, why not save Chen Chongqing along the way? He did his utmost to make his voice calmer and more indifferent, to appear as if he did not care too much. But this could not escape the eyes of the Tang's second master. He looked at Tang 36 and said, "These two matters are not related." Tang 36 said, "If it's the will of the heavens, letting Chen Chongqing live will more or less affect the Divine Queen's state of mind." The Tang's second master noiselessly laughed, then indifferently said, "First of all, we are not enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens, but talking about human affairs. Secondly, we are surnamed Tang, not Chen. We are not those loyal and righteous officials that followed the 17 princes back to the capital. We should not care about Chen Chongqing's life or death, because we need to ensure our own survival." Tang 36 said, "Second uncle, have you ever thought about what would happen if you failed?" The Tang's second master smiled. "If that person can't break the heavenly slaughter array and help us enter the imperial palace, then we can naturally only return to Wenshui." Tang 36 calmly said, "Are you so sure that our Tang family will not be affected in any way?" "Of course, because no one will ever see us appear in the capital." The Tang's second master calmly said, "Don't forget what I said before. Our Tang clan will never engage in business that might result in a loss." Tang 36 said, "But you also mentioned Wang Po's name before." The Tang's second master did not get angry. He sighed and said, "Correct, besides Wang Po and Su Li, these are the two most unprofitable businesses the old master has ever done in his life. If the two of them were both in the capital tonight, Su Li would trap the Divine Empress in the Mausoleum of Books, have Wang Po calculate the changes in the array, find the weak point, and then enter the Imperial Palace alone to fight with Shuexingchuan. Would there still be a need for us to personally appear? And the result? One person insists on being a lonely and devoted scholar, covered in a shabby aura. One insists on being a prodigal son who has left the world, unable to cast aside a beautiful wife like a flower. Truly is a pity. Let's not mention the matter of Wang Po being forced out of Wenshui by second uncle." Tang 36 smiled at him and said, "When the Tang clan needed them the most, they just so happened to not be there. Perhaps it's precisely because they can all see that our Tang clan, no, your Tang clan only knows how to calculate numbers and speak of money, making them feel disgusted, let alone feel reverence." His smile was very innocent, very pure, and very dazzling. The Tang's second master calmly gazed at him, then suddenly raised his right hand and slapped him across the face. With a crisp slap, Tang 36 crashed into the wall, the left side of his face swollen and a trickle of blood trickling from the corner of his lip. He seemed to cut a very sorry figure. But he was still smiling so happily, making it seem even more dazzling. "I said before, I don't want to play these childish games with you," the Tang's second master said very seriously. Tang 36 swayed as he stood up. Taking a handkerchief from his sleeve, he carefully wiped the blood from the corner of his lips and said, "No, it's because you know that I'm right." The Tang's second master smiled at him and said, "You really think that second uncle doesn't dare to kill you?" Tang 36 smiled at him and said, "In front of so many people in the Orthodox Academy, I already said that second uncle has always wanted me dead, so how could I think that you wouldn't dare to kill me?" Without waiting for the Tang's second master to speak, he smiled and continued, "I trust that the old master already knows of our conversation in the Orthodox Academy, and I trust that Grandpa Great Guardian will also send our conversation back to Wenshui. Once I return home, I will also personally tell the old master of this matter, so if second uncle doesn't kill me today, it really will be rather troublesome." The Tang's second master smiled at him and said, "You should understand the old master's eyes and temper better than I do." Tang 36 chuckled. An old man, no matter how good his eyes are, they're about to turn muddy, and no matter how bad his temper is, he still dotes on his only grandson. Second uncle, even if you give birth to one and raise him to my age with such a sweet mouth, it will still take several years. I reckon that there won't be enough time, so second uncle, if you want to continue your life as a hedonistic young master, or continue to endure silently, playing the part of a hedonistic young master in a situation where everyone knows, perhaps you really do need to kill me before I return to Wenshui. Otherwise, this game of you hiding things from me and I pretending to hide things from you really won't be able to continue." As the two spoke, they were both faintly smiling. Two very similar and handsome faces faced each other, but this scene was not harmonious at all. On the contrary, it made one shiver in fear. Just what sort of uncle and nephew were they? The Tang's second master's smile finally faded. He looked at Tang 36 and asked, "Are you forcing me to fight over the family property?" Tang 36 smiled. "Our Tang clan, no. Doesn't your Tang clan like to use profit to manipulate the hearts of people? I also want to try." At these words, the Tang's second master once more gave a noiseless laugh, his mouth gaping. He seemed rather terrifying. "Don't laugh like that, second uncle." Tang 36 suddenly restrained his smile and seriously said to him, "This is very foolish, this really is very much like an idiot." Because it was closer to the night sky, when there were stars, the peak of the mausoleum of books would normally be brighter than the ground. But tonight there were too many clouds and no stars, so the darkness here was even darker than in other parts of the capital. The scene formed from clear light in front of the divine path was also set off even more clearly, making it possible to see even the tiniest detail. In that period of time earlier, Chen Chongsheng had seen the Orthodox Academy up there, had seen that middle-aged man very similar to Tang 36. He did not know who that person was, but he could roughly guess. It was just that the current him could not imagine what had happened between uncle and nephew, nor did he know what the people of the Wenshui Tangs were preparing to do in the capital. The Tianhai Divine Empress probably knew a lot, but she did not care. She had already expected that the Tang clan would definitely send people, that the Tang clan should have also sent people. How could that elder that she had used her supreme authority to suppress by the banks of the Wenshui for more than 200 years miss out on tonight's chance? The people that should have come seem to have all come. The people that shouldn't have come have also come. The Tianhai Divine Empress's gaze left the scene in the darkness and cast into the distance. The distance she spoke of here was an extremely distant place. Previously, whether it was the appearance of Zhu Luo and Guan Xinka, Wuqiong Bai and Biyanghong, the 17 rebellious princes, or the 4 great clans, none of them had been able to cause the slightest change in her expression. However, when she looked at that distant place, her expression finally became a little more serious. The capital was in the center of the continent. The furthest place from here was either the great western continent, the islands of the southern sea, or the endless snowy plains to the north of Xuelao City. Perhaps it was the Cloud Grave. There was a solitary peak in the Cloud Grave, and 300 li away from the solitary peak was a sparsely populated little town called Xining. Outside the little town was an old temple, and behind the temple was a small stream. It was said that this stream flowed from the solitary peak in the cloud grave. At some point, a monk had appeared by the stream. The monk wore a black monk's robe. It was covered in dust and cracks, yet it gave off an ethereal feeling. The monk had a delicate and handsome face. It was impossible to tell his exact age, but he was probably middle-aged. There were a few faint wrinkles at the corners of his eyes, but his eyes were serene and deep, brimming with boundless compassion and love. It was like he could see into the infinite distance, see everything. The monk dipped his feet into the chilly water of the stream and sighed. The emotions in this sigh were abnormally complex. His feet had already walked hundreds of thousands of li, and were too tired. He and his clansmen had left the continent for nearly 1,000 years, far too long. A faint smile appeared on the monk's face. Rain suddenly began to fall from the sky above the stream. The cloud grave was the home of all clouds and also the source of all water. This place was very close to the cloud grave, so this rain was the newest rain. Tens of thousands of li away, the capital also began to rain. Misty raindrops pierced through the darkness and fell upon the streets and mountains. On an ordinary straight street in the southern part of the city, the falling rain slightly deformed, rays of light refracting to and fro. A Taoist walked out of the rainy night, out of thin air. He stood on the dark street in the autumn rain, yet he gave off the feeling that he was not here. He was somewhere, anywhere in the world. His true position was constantly changing, making it impossible to determine. The drizzle fell noiselessly. On the two sides of the ordinary street, the common people were sleeping, not a single one of them awake. Only he was awake. The Taoist gazed even further south at that mausoleum, his expression calm. At the peak of that mausoleum, the Tianhai Divine Empress was calmly gazing at him in the darkness. Chen Chongqing was also looking at the Taoist. He silently called out "Master," but did not say it aloud. Because the Taoist was not looking at him, only at the Tianhai Divine Empress. He recalled that in the 10-some years he had lived in Xining Village's old temple, his master would often only look at his senior brother, not at him. It was like he had never existed in his master's eyes. "Empress, abdicate," the Taoist said to the Mausoleum of Books. Chapter 639. Why? 677 years and 364 days ago, you secretly left the 100-herb garden to meet with senior brother and me. At that time, you said, if we could help the former emperor ascend to the throne, what would you do? 214 years and 69 days ago, the former emperor's eye condition worsened and he was unable to see anything. He decided to let you revise the memorials on his behalf and asked for my and Shixiang's opinion. At that time, you said it was only temporary. This temporary lasted 214 years and 69 days. 20 years ago, before the former emperor returned to the Sea of Stars, you told the former emperor that you would return the throne to the Chen clan after a year. But, do you mean that I should follow my original promise and pass the throne to one of these useless people? The Tianhai Divine Empress gazed at the 15 imperial carriages that had already entered the capital, at the princes of the Chen imperial clan on these carriages. A mocking smile appeared on her face. This is a very good reason. The so-called righteousness of the common people really does seem to be more important than personal promises. Moreover, you also said that I have to consider the continuation of the Tianhai clan. The Taoist stood in the rain and gazed at the Mausoleum of Books. He calmly said, but these reasons could have been used 20 years ago, but they cannot be used now, because I have already considered it for you. The Tianhai Divine Empress drew back her gaze and gazed at the scene in the darkness. Then in your view, to whom should we pass the throne? The Taoist was in the picture. He should be on the street in the southern part of the capital, but it also seemed to be somewhere else at the same time. No one could determine his true location, because he did not have a true location. He was like a swallow in the drizzle, seemingly in the rain, or perhaps above the rain. He said, "The throne of the great Zhou should naturally be passed on to the only son of you and the previous emperor." Chen Chongqing was right behind the Tianhai Divine Empress, but she did not turn around. She indifferently said, "Pass it on to this kid who's about to die." Emperor Xian had many sons, but Your Highness, you only have this one son. He is the rightful crown prince. In his body, besides the blood of the Chen imperial clan, there is also the blood of the Tianhai clan. After ascending to the throne, he will naturally look after his maternal family and let him inherit the throne. I believe that the imperial clan will not have any objections, nor will the Tianhai clan. Isn't this perfect? The Taoist said, "The confluence of the north and south is a success. The great Zhou dynasty will flourish for generations to come. The only thing we need to do is to ask you to abdicate." It was just a simple abdication. What a good just! The Tianhai Divine Empress calmly gazed at the Taoist in the rain. The Taoist quietly stood in the rain and no longer spoke. This was because he had more or less finished what he wanted to say. Moreover, the entire continent had probably heard their conversation. For some reason, the Tianhai Divine Empress suddenly began to laugh. Her laugh was extremely carefree, but also thick with ridicule. "From the time you sent him to the capital more than 2 years ago until now, you seem to have always been doing one thing, and that is to let me see him." Chen Chongqing sat on the ground and looked at her tall back. Hearing this sentence, he realized that it seemed to be true. Whether it was the engagement with the Divine General of the East's estate, or the new students of the Orthodox Academy, the Ivy Festival, or the announcement on the Divine Avenue, many things that happened in the past seemed to be for the sake of allowing him to grow faster, and at the same time, appear in the sight of the Divine Empress as soon as possible. A lot of things were driven by Archbishop Melisha, but behind him, there was definitely the shadow of that Taoist. When one sees him, one will be curious, will have an inquisitive heart, will have doubt. The Tianhai Divine Empress held her hands behind her back and slowly said to the Taoist in the rain, to the world in the rain, "He is like an unripe fruit, nurtured by all of you, hastened to ripen, quietly watched by we, until finally, he is about to ripen, exuding a fruity fragrance. If one smells it, they will have the desire to eat him. To the entire world, this fruit is extremely alluring, and to we, it is even more so." Tianhai turned her head to glance at Chen Chongqing. "If I eat him, it will be the most perfect cycle of the heavenly Tao, the most perfect conclusion to this karma." She turned her head to gaze at the entire world in the rain, a mocking smile appearing on her lips. "But we will not eat him." The entire world was quiet. Whether it was the mausoleum of books or the capital, only the sound of the drizzle falling to the ground could be heard. She continued, "This longevity fruit might be able to help mortals become immortals, but presumably, it will only be harmful to me." Finally, she sighed with regret. "Immortals gave me the longevity fruit. Alas, you are not immortals, you are only people. Only people. Only people." There was a garden in the divine kingdom. In the garden was a tree, and on this tree was a fruit. This fruit contained an incomparably rich life. As long as one ate it, they could transcend the mortal world and obtain an unimaginable spiritual experience and harvest. This was a legend of the sacred light continent. The people of this world should not have heard of it, but he had. The monk who had come from afar slowly raised his head by the stream and gazed at the distant capital. There was an additional trace of seriousness in his clear eyes. The Taoist stood in the rain, still very calm, but it was impossible to tell what he was truly feeling. The surrounding streets were very quiet. In this extremely deep night, people were still sleeping, and only he was awake. But was he awake? Ever since he had appeared out of nowhere in the rain, not a single drop of the falling rain had been able to fall on his Taoist robe. Yet at this moment, A few beads of water had appeared in his hair, sparkling and translucent. Yes, that longevity fruit was a conspiracy, or rather, a trap. Other than the canon of flowing west hidden behind this entire affair, there was nothing too profound about it. It was very simple, not complicated at all. From the moment he set up this trap 20 years ago, he had clearly understood this point. This trap had never been too complicated, because it involved the wondrous will of the heavenly Tao. Moreover, the more complicated the trap, the easier it was to arouse the vigilance of people on Tianhai's level. But he believed that besides those gods of that distant continent, no one could see through the problem of the longevity fruit, not even Tianhai. And he believed that, to anyone, this longevity fruit was an irresistible temptation, especially to Tianhai. This was a killing trap that secretly conformed to the heavenly Tao. There was no reason why it could not work. Yet Tianhai had not fallen into the trap. She had not seen through the problem of the longevity fruit. She was only acting according to her own will. Did she want to eat the longevity fruit? Of course. But she knew very well that those people had spent countless efforts, used 20 years, to send him to her. On the surface, they had used the canon of flowing west to cut off 3 years of age, seemingly not wanting her to know who he was. But how could those people not know that she would definitely know who he was? So those people wanted her to eat him. The entire world was quietly waiting for her to eat him. The entire world was prepared to watch as she ate her own son. Then she would not eat him. Even if there was no problem with this fruit, even if eating this fruit might really allow her to transcend life and death and enter a realm of true freedom, she still would not eat it. It was not because she was cautious or wary, but because she was loyal to her own will. She was her will. Her will was that when the entire world wanted her to do something, she would definitely not do it. Behind Xining Village's old temple, the monk vaguely understood something. He slightly turned his head to look upstream of the stream. It was late at night. There were no lights in this desolate village, and it was pitch black all around. But in his eyes, the scenery around him was still as bright as day. He could see the fish quietly floating in the crevices of the stones, could see flower petals drifting along with the water. The flower petals drifted to his bare feet and slowly turned. He smiled and sighed. He felt somewhat regretful, but not disappointed. Either long life or eternal fall into the abyss, this is a gamble. You not eating him does not mean that your gaze can see through the supreme heavenly Tao, only that you are afraid. The Taoist standing in the rain was not disappointed, because this was only the beginning. He said, "You know that this is a scheme of the heavenly Tao, that your opponent is not me, but the heavenly Tao, so you simply do not dare to enter the field." Hearing this, the Tianhai Divine Empress slightly raised her brows like a phoenix about to take flight. "Since you fear the heavenly Tao, are you not afraid of the backlash of the heavenly Tao?" The Taoist calmly looked at her and said, "Do not forget that when you swore a blood oath to the starry sky, I was also present. Even if the heavenly Tao descends, the one who will die will still be him." The Tianhai Divine Empress calmly said, "We will personally watch as he dies, ensuring that nothing unexpected will happen." The Taoist sighed, "You truly are that world's most callous and emotionless person." The Tianhai Divine Empress replied, "Likewise." The two seemed to be speaking across from each other, but they were actually separated by several dozen li, sometimes even feeling like they were separated by several thousand li. Because the Taoist's position in this world was still illusory and indistinct, impossible to determine. Chen Chongqing also did not know his position in this world. He had once believed himself to be a young Taoist from Xining Village's old temple, his master's student, but now he realized that he was just a fruit. If he could be eaten, he would have some value. If he could not, he would be ignored by others, only waiting for him to ripen, fall, and then turn into mud. He was the Tianhai Divine Empress's own son, but she so calmly watched as he died. Logically speaking, the two people speaking to each other in front of the entire world should have been the people closest to him. One was his own mother, the other was his master who had raised him into a man. Yet when they spoke, they did not even glance at him. When it came to being callous and emotionless, who could experience it more vividly and more deeply than him tonight? That indifferent, sorrowful, and somewhat laughable feeling. What was this feeling? It was very bone-piercing. A bone-piercing pain, in an extremely short amount of time, exploded from every part of his body. With a few soft whooshes, the golden needle in his neck was sent flying, stabbing deeply into the stone floor. His blood, which contained an infinite amount of energy, surged through his internal organs like a flood. The remaining true chi rampaged through his severed meridians, incessantly attacking his bones and flesh. A spiderweb of cracks began to appear on his internal organs. His face was pale. He was in great pain. He was about to die. Chapter 640. The Taoist that had appeared out of thin air in the rainy night was the previous principal of the Orthodox Academy, Shang Xingzhou, and also the extremely mysterious Taoist Ji of Taizong's era. He was the leader, the mastermind, of tonight's events in the capital. After he appeared, the only sound that could be heard was the Tianhai Divine Empress's conversation with him. Whether it was Zhu Luo, Guan Xingke, or the 15 princes that had already entered the capital, they all maintained their silence. This represented respect, perhaps reverence. But the heavens and earth were very vast, the world very large. In the end, there would not only be one or two voices. There would always be other voices. Is there a need to do this? A voice arose from the canal to the southeast of the capital. The large ship sailing through the canal slowly came to a stop. The expression of the Taoist nun at the bow of the ship suddenly changed. She stretched out her hand like lightning, but she grabbed nothing. A different smear of red had always rippled in the gloomy waters of the canal, but it was now gradually fading. In the next moment, a ray of light suddenly appeared in the night sky outside the mausoleum of books. It clearly illuminated the rain falling from the sky, and also illuminated a figure within it. This was not a bolt of lightning descending from the dark clouds, but the chi produced when that figure encountered the seal of the mausoleum of books. This figure slowly floated down from the rainy sky, landing on the riverbank outside the mausoleum of books. It was a middle-aged scholar. His long gown was already drenched by the rain, but he did not seem the slightest bit disheveled. His calm eyes possessed an enchanting elegance. A small red flower was tied to the pinky of his right hand, lightly swaying in the rain. Bi-Yang-Hong, this expert of the divine domain, had also failed to break through the seal of the mausoleum of books, and had been isolated outside. But since he had already spoken, he would continue to speak. A shrill sound pierced through the air. Bi-Yang-Hong's figure suddenly faded, a clear path appearing in the heavy curtains of rain. A straight wave appeared on the river outside the mausoleum of books. In an instant, he had charged into the mausoleum of books and arrived at the very bottom of the divine path, in front of the stone plain. But he could not continue forward, because the Tianhai Divine Empress glanced at him. A bolt of lightning descended from the sky, landing in front of Bi-Yang-Hong. A patch of dazzling white light directly evaporated all the water in the shallow canal, and several extremely thick scorch marks appeared on the hard black stone. Bi-Yang-Hong gazed at the peak of the mausoleum of books at the end of the divine path, his expression grave. Just a moment ago, he had sensed a faint change in the aura of heaven and earth. He had stopped, or else he might have been struck by that bolt of lightning and suffered heavy injuries. The Tianhai Divine Empress only glanced at it. The realm that she revealed was simply too terrifying. She actually had a vague feeling that she could already mobilize the laws of heaven and earth. Everyone knew that the Tianhai Divine Empress's cultivation was unfathomable, but only now did they realize that all their speculations had still been underestimating her. On the official road to the northwest, Guan Xingke raised his head and pushed up his bamboo hat, revealing an ordinary and unremarkable face, his eyes somewhat stern. Zhu Luo, who was in the wheelchair, looked at that place quietly. He used his left hand to gently tap the scabbard of his sword. That was his only hand right now. The capital is my home ground. You shouldn't have chosen this place, the Tianhai Divine Empress calmly said to the world. Bianghong stopped, but he could still speak. No matter where it was, we still had to come. We did not wish for you to come, the Tianhai Divine Empress calmly said to him, because we do not want to kill you. Bianghong replied, since one reads the books of the sages, one must always seek peace of mind. The Tianhai Divine Empress replied, truly worthy of being Bianghong. Our heart is greatly comforted. Amongst these people, we have always felt that you were not bad. You have a different color, a different bearing. The rain suddenly fell into disorder, transforming into countless ripples. The waves in the river outside the mausoleum of books became unbridled, the qi a little disordered. The Taoist nun had also come to the mausoleum of books. Standing at Bianghong's side, she warily looked up. The most foolish thing you did in your life was to marry this thing. The Tianhai Divine Empress mocked Bianghong. The Taoist nun was his wife, another of the storms of the 8 directions, Wuqiongbai. Wuqiongbai was furious at these words. She felt that the voices of the rain and that woman were very vexing, but she did not dare express it. At a time like this, Bianghong also could not say anything. After a moment of silence, he said, Empress, since he will die in the end, why does Empress not give him a quick death? He did not finish his sentence. The second half that he did not finish was, and then we will fight to our heart's content. Pleasure, on rare occasions, could be understood as pain and pleasure. Chen Chongqing was currently in extreme pain, unable to feel any pleasure, even if the night wind in the rain came from 1,000 li away and grew stronger and stronger. Hearing Bianghong's words, the Tianhai Divine Empress turned to glance at him. It was only an indifferent glance, but she clearly saw the situation within his body. According to the calculations of the Elder of Heavenly Secrets, before he was even born, his sun wheel had been destroyed, his 9 meridians severed. At the moment, Chen Chongqing's 72 Taoist meridians had all been severed and his 365 qi openings had all been ruptured. He was currently enduring an unimaginable pain, just like when he was in her womb. But back then, he had still been ignorant and senseless. The only person in the world who could feel his pain was her. The Tianhai Divine Empress thought of the pain she had felt when he was in her womb, the pain she had felt when he was born. Her brow slightly creased in loathing. The rain gradually increased in intensity, but the stars faintly glimmered, as well as that even more tranquil and gentle splendor. Guan Xingke pushed Zhu Luo in his wheelchair into the mausoleum of books. Wind and rain came from all directions. The Taoist was in some place in the rain. The monk was by a stream tens of thousands of li away. Tonight's events in the capital had always been the Tianhai Divine Empress's plan. Now that everyone had arrived, Chen Chongqing no longer had any value in his existence, so he could naturally die. The rain falling from the night sky grew heavier and heavier, connecting into lines and then gradually becoming a torrent. The wind it carried also grew stronger and stronger. Thunder rumbled from the depths of the storm. Occasionally, true lightning would illuminate the night sky, illuminating the scene at the peak of the mausoleum of books. The Tianhai Divine Empress stood with her hands held behind her at the edge of the divine path, her beautiful face devoid of any unnecessary emotion. Her black hair danced behind her, making her seem like a demon god. The torrential rain was incapable of wetting a single hair of hers, but it soaked Chen Chongqing's clothes. Chen Chongqing's face was pale, his entire body drenched. He seemed abnormally weak and pitiful. He gasped for breath, using his hand to support himself on the puddle-covered ground. With great difficulty, he raised his head and looked at her. At this moment, he was truly very calm, because he was already numb, already utterly disappointed in this world. The Tianhai Divine Empress sensed his movements and indifferently said, "Yorong wanted to save you, so I sent her away." As she said this, she did not turn to look at him. Chen Chongqing's body, which had become somewhat numb from the cold, pain, and disappointment, slightly softened upon hearing these words, a final bit of warmth remaining in his chest. Yes, in the end, there were still people in this world who cared about him, like Yorong, like the people in the Orthodox Academy, like Luoluo in the distant White Emperor City, like his senior brother who was somewhere unknown. "Thank my lady," he said to the Tianhai Divine Empress's back. He thanked her for saying these words in the final moment of his life, thus helping him remember that there was still some beauty in life. This way, when he left, perhaps he would be somewhat reluctant to part from his nostalgia, but at least he would not be sad because he had nothing to cherish. The rain grew heavier and heavier, flowing down the sides of the white stone divine path and down the mausoleum of books. More and more of it converged, ultimately becoming a waterfall with astonishing momentum. The sound of the night rain was vexing, the torrential rain a disaster. In the forest, one could faintly see the figures of many wild beasts fleeing, but it was no longer possible to hear the cries of autumn insects. A squirrel leapt through the forest, seemingly wanting to find a suitable place to take shelter from the rain, yet unable to do so, it was quickly drenched. The rain was too heavy, so heavy that the squirrel's originally oily and waterproof fur could not completely endure it. Its fluffy tail drooped down, its gray fur sticking to its body, making it seem very pitiful. If its gray fur were dry and fluffy, perhaps this squirrel would have seemed very fat. Just like the squirrel in the 100 Herb Gardens forest. The Tianhai Divine Empress's gaze followed the squirrel as it moved through the forest. Only after a very long time had passed did she withdraw her gaze. In the mausoleum of books, experts had already gathered. The capital seemed calm in the rain, but countless undercurrents were surging. Her rule over the great Zhou dynasty was currently suffering the most powerful challenge. Yet at this moment, she was very focused on watching a squirrel take shelter from the rain. Just what was she thinking? 2 years ago, in the palace, you should have seen a squirrel. All of a sudden, she uttered these words. There was no beginning or end to this sentence. Chen Chongqing was somewhat absent-minded, not knowing what she was talking about. Then, he vaguely remembered a few things. It truly was something from a very long time ago. On the night of the Ivy Festival 2 years ago, he had been lured into the cold palace by Mou and imprisoned by the array of the Tong Palace. In order to escape, he had risked entering the underground through the Gate of Life, but he had encountered the Black Dragon. With great difficulty, he had returned to the surface, but he had ended up in a pond in the imperial palace. At the time, a middle-aged woman had been standing by the pond, perhaps preparing to wash her hands or wash her clothes. At the time, he had been in the pond, his entire body soaked and his appearance in a sorry state. It had also been late at night, so the middle-aged woman had been frightened. She had taken a step back, her wooden clogs clattering against the stones. At the time, in the forest by the pond, a squirrel had been eating. In fright, it had thrown down its fruit and jumped to the second floor of the side hall. As it ran along the railing, its swaying tail had knocked a flower pot askew. At the time, the middle-aged woman had been directly under the flower pot. At the time, Chen Chongqing had just escaped from his predicament and was still deep in the palace. He was extremely nervous and could not be discovered by anyone, but when he saw this sight, he had rushed over without even thinking. He held the middle-aged woman in his arms and spun her around. That way, even if the flower pot fell, it would only hit his back and not the woman. Fortunately, the flower pot had not fallen. Now that he thought about it, none of this was real, because she was no ordinary middle-aged woman. She was the Tianhai Divine Empress, so how could she be frightened? His actions at the time had definitely been very unnecessary in her eyes, very laughable, right? But why had she suddenly brought up that squirrel? When he thought of the time, Chen Chongqing felt somewhat perplexed. In the great dictionary of appreciation of Tang poetry, there are different interpretations of those 2 lines of Li Shangyin's poem. I agree with that interpretation. If one can wait, one can wait. Only it is. Chapter 641. Back then, why did you charge over? Because I was afraid that you would be injured by a flower pot. Even if you were deep in the palace, once you were discovered, you would cause a great deal of trouble. I didn't have time to think. Even if you were in a hurry to attend the Ivy Festival in Weiyang Palace and take out the marriage contract to destroy the Qiushan clan's marriage proposal. I didn't think that much. 3 squirrels. What? The peak of the Mausoleum of Books was shrouded in torrential rain. The conversation between Chen Chongqing and the Tianhai Divine Empress was not drowned out by the rain. He did not understand what she meant by those words. 3 squirrels? The Tianhai Divine Empress gazed at the squirrel gradually disappearing into the rain in silence for a very long time. The first time she saw Chen Chongqing, there was a squirrel. Just now, in the Orthodox Academy, there was a squirrel. At this time, there was also a squirrel. When she saw the first squirrel, he was in a very troublesome situation, yet he disregarded everything and rushed over to save her. When she saw the second squirrel, he was in a very dangerous situation, yet he only wanted to beg her to spare Lu Qing and those Li Palace priests, completely abandoning his so-called stubbornness and pride. When she saw the third squirrel, he was in a desperate situation. He was about to be killed by her, but because of what she said, he thanked her sincerely. Just what sort of young man was this? An extremely complex expression appeared on the Tianhai Divine Empress's face. There was some ridicule, some disdain, some anger, some loathing, but ultimately all of it transformed into apathy. Such soft-heartedness, rather similar to that father of yours. How did I give birth to such a useless son like you? After saying this, a chill flashed across her beautiful face, then swiftly transformed into an unimaginable fiendish intent. Without any words, without any warning, without even glancing at him, she raised her right hand and struck at the top of his head. Her right hand left behind a streak of lightning in the pitch-black night, descending like a mountain. Countless cries of alarm rose from the capital in the darkness, each with different emotions, but all equally shocked. No one had expected her to strike just like this. Boom! A clap of thunder seemed to explode from the peak of the Mausoleum of Books. Countless bolts of lightning flashed and then descended upon the Mausoleum of Books. The torrential rain poured down and the darkness was as black as ink. Occasionally, it would be torn apart and illuminated by the occasional bolt of lightning, revealing an indeterminate scene. The Tianhai Divine Empress stood against the storm. Her right hand landed on Chen Chongqing's head. A powerful and terrifying power and a sacred and profound aura appeared between heaven and earth at almost the same time. This power came from the Tianhai Divine Empress's body. This qi came from the Mausoleum of Books beneath her, even from the entire world. This was the most supreme power and aura between heaven and earth. It triggered countless irregular phenomena, and lightning rumbled amidst the violent winds and torrential rain. That power and that presence met in her body and then entered Chen Chongqing's body through her right hand. The storm was coming. In an instant, the 70 broken meridians in Chen Chongqing's body were crushed to pieces, 365 qi openings were broken, and the wounds on the surface of his internal organs went deep down, causing blood to violently surge within his body. The remnant starlight in the corners of the broken meridians and the depths of the qi openings was also unable to escape this storm and was forced out. Countless powder-like starlight fragments came to the surface of his skin from the depths of his body, exuding a pitiful yet indifferent radiance through his soaked Taoist robe. No matter how fierce the storm was, it could not wash away the starlight. No matter how fiercely the storm raged, it could not drown out his cries of pain. After a moment, his mind and will were crushed to pieces by this storm. Unable to endure any longer, he cried out in pain. His cries pierced through the storm, spreading throughout the entire mausoleum of books, and then to even further places. His cries were filled with endless pain, hoarse and lacerating, like the final cry of a cub for help, giving off a feeling of incomparable despair. Everyone who heard his cries could sense his current mood and situation. Whether they were friend or foe, they all felt the urge to cry. Urin had been in the mausoleum of books this entire time. He was viewing the monolith. When those important figures and supreme experts were separated by several dozen li, or even several thousand li, no one in the capital could hear them, so he naturally did not hear them. A drizzle fell from the night sky. Leaning on his walking stick, he took 2 steps into the monolith hut. Borrowing the eaves of the hut to shelter from the rain, he continued to view the lines on the monolith. The storm gradually intensified and the darkness deepened. He continued to walk into the monolith hut. Unable to see, he used his hands to feel the lines on the monolith. No matter how fierce the storm was, it could not affect his state of mind as he viewed the monolith. Occasionally, lightning would illuminate the surface of the monolith, but it could not awaken him from his mental world. Only when that pained cry spread throughout the entire mausoleum of books, into this monolith hut, did it fall into his ears. Urin felt like he had been struck by lightning, his face abnormally pale. Because he could hear that this was his junior brother's cry. He could also hear from this cry that his junior brother was in great pain and despair. He turned to look at the place where the cry had come from. He was already very high up in the mausoleum of books. That place was even higher, and it was very likely to be the peak of the mausoleum of books. He didn't think about anything else and limped towards that direction. That walking stick that had accompanied him for 20 years quietly lay in that monolith hut, waiting for his return. The higher one went into the mausoleum of books, the steeper the terrain became and the more difficult it was to climb. Moreover, there were shrubs everywhere, and the torrential rain had made the mountain rocks incomparably slippery. The mountains were covered in mud, making it even more difficult. And this wasn't even considering the fact that he had always been a person with inconvenient legs. How could he care about all this? He used his hands to claw at the cracks in the rocks and his legs to push against the muddy ground and tree roots, doing his utmost to climb to the peak. He only had one hand and his leg was somewhat deformed. His hand very quickly broke, and some of his fingernails were torn off. His leg also very quickly broke. The path he climbed was covered in blood, but it was quickly washed away by the torrential rain. He should have been in great pain, but he could not feel it. His actions were very dangerous, but he did not realize it, because his junior brother's cry was still echoing through the mausoleum. He only knew that his junior brother was in great pain, in great danger. Suddenly Urin stopped. The storm suddenly stopped, and no more lightning fell from the sky. The cry had also vanished. The entire mausoleum of books, the entire world, was completely silent. It was so quiet that it was deathly still. The mausoleum seemed to have become a true mausoleum. His heart was filled with fear and he felt very cold. He gazed at the peak of the mausoleum of books and gave 2 painful cries. He could not speak, and even his cries were somewhat strange. Just like a child. Just like a worried and wronged child. Then he wiped away the muddy water or tears on his face, and continued to climb to the peak. Chen Chongqing quietly lay on the ground, his entire body drenched, his eyes tightly closed, not moving an inch. The fragments of stars that had drifted out of his body could not be washed away by the torrential rain, but now they were gradually dispersed by the night wind, returning to nothingness. The rain stopped and the clouds scattered. A watery starlight fell on the peak. The Tianhai Divine Empress held her hands behind her, silently gazing at the multitude of stars in the night sky. She stood in front of him, blocking out the starlight, also blocking out the fate behind the multitude of stars. In the future, don't do those strange things again. The Tianhai Divine Empress's voice was somewhat exhausted. This was an extremely rare sight. Only she and Chen Chongqing remained on the peak. Chen Chongqing was already dead. Who was she speaking to? Chen Chongqing opened his eyes, waking up. His face was pale and incredibly weak, and he incessantly coughed out rainwater. He gazed at her back in silence for a very long time. Finally, he said, "Thank you." The Tianhai Divine Empress did not turn her head. "You're welcome." "Thank you, you're welcome." This is something that will be featured in the book Choosing Heaven's Chronicles, starting from Sun Mei, to the present and to the future. There are two versions of the last two sentences. I discussed it with my author friends for a very long time. Guanu preferred the other version, and then after half an hour of intense debate, it was rejected. As for the name of this chapter, I once wanted to call it Three Squirrels, but later on I discovered that it was too unserious, and no one would pay me advertising fees, so I named it, Calling from the Center of the World, Everyone Knows the Last Word. Using that song by student Zhang Jie to describe it. This is love, hey hey, this is love, hey hey. See you tomorrow. Chapter 642. When the entire world thought that Chen Chongqing's life was very good, only he knew that he didn't have long to live. When the whole world, including himself, thought he was dead, he survived. He didn't die. He lay in the rain at the peak of the mausoleum of books, his face pale and incomparably weak, but he did not die. The entire world was silent, deathly still. As the torrential rain wreaked havoc in the darkness and the incessant lightning terrifyingly illuminated the mausoleum of books, the Tianhai Divine Empress slapped her palm at Chen Chongqing's head. She did not want to kill him, but to save him. At this moment, the rain had already become extremely light and silent. The people in the capital were still asleep and had not woken up. Taoist Ji stood on the rainy street and looked in the direction of the mausoleum of book. He thought to himself, just who is truly awake? He did not expect that this matter would lead to such a change. From 600 years ago, from 200 years ago, from 20 years ago, he had been preparing for tonight. He had been vigilant and planning for tonight. For tonight, he had laid down countless contingencies, made the most perfect preparations. Whether the Tianhai Divine Empress killed Chen Chongqing or ate Chen Chongqing, it was all within his calculations. The true killer of his scheme was still in the rainforest of the Mausoleum of Books, and no one had discovered it. The Tianhai Divine Empress was the current master of the great Zhou dynasty. There was nothing wrong with her saying that the Mausoleum of Books was her home field. But he was a legitimate successor of the orthodoxy, and the Mausoleum of Books was also his home ground. He had already made preparations. After she killed Chen Chongqing, he would reveal the truth of the entire matter and shake her soul and will. Then, he would use the infinite holy light released by Chen Chongqing's death to trigger the heavenly Tao's response. He would sacrifice the starry sky and invite divine punishment to directly kill her on the spot. But Tianhai didn't kill Chen Chongqing, nor did he eat Chen Chongqing. Thus, even if he revealed the truth of the entire matter at this moment, he would not be able to break a crack in her Tao heart. Chen Chongqing was still alive, so he naturally had no way of using the holy light within his body to summon the divine punishment. There were many things that Taoist Ji didn't understand. For example, why did she save Chen Chongqing? In the end, even a vicious tiger would not eat its cubs. No one believed that the Tianhai Divine Empress would care about this, at least not him. Are you really not afraid of the backlash from the heavenly Tao? He looked into the distance calmly and silently. He understood something. The choice had been made, and the impact was just beginning to show. Chen Chongqing was most aware of the changes in his body and knew what had happened. At the time, the furious storm had washed over his body, the snake-like lightning illuminating the pitch-black world. The Tianhai Divine Empress did not turn around. Her right hand, carrying with it countless storms and the power of mountains, directly fell on his head. The majestic power of the world and that incomparably ancient Qi poured into his body. In an instant, it really was only an instant. In an instant, before he could even think, everything in his body shattered. Regardless of whether it was his internal organs that had countless cracks, his meridians that were already riddled with holes, or his chi openings, they were all directly shattered and fused into his bones and blood. Everything happened in an extremely short period of time, but to Chen Chongqing, it felt like 100 years had already passed. In this short period of time that he didn't have time to think, he felt too much pain. This pain had countless forms, countless tastes, all mixed together, becoming countless small knives, through countless angles and methods, cutting towards the deepest part of his soul. This was not the end, but the beginning. In an instant, it really was only an instant, a moment that he didn't even have time to despair, everything in his body began to reform. Whether it was his internal organs that had split like flower petals, his meridians that had been severed like sand, or his shapeless chi openings that were already too horrible to look at, under the combined effect of that majestic strength and ancient chi, they began to condense and then take shape. In that instant between these two moments, only the outside of his body was intact, but the inside had already become a sea of blood. In the sea of blood, white lotuses gradually grew. Those were bones, and then corals grew. Those were flesh, and then branches grew. Those were meridians, and then leaves grew. Those were chi openings. The crushed internal organs, meridians, and chi openings gradually reformed and returned to his body. If someone could see this sight, they would definitely be shocked, speechless by this miraculous sight. To Chen Chongqing, who had endured all this was an extremely painful process. To describe extreme pain, it was often described as pain entering the bone marrow, but his bone marrow had been shattered and then reformed into little rivulets. There was another phrase, pain entering the heart, but his heart had also been shattered, and then it gradually floated back up in the sea of blood. This was destruction and also rebirth, or perhaps new life. This was a transformation of the heavens and the earth, a new appearance for the sun and moon, but it was all in one person's body. Let alone him, not even Zhixio would be able to endure this sort of pain. In the storm of the capital, his cries of pain echoed. He was resisting this pain. At the time, his mind had long since become numb from pain, on the verge of slackening. If this really was the case, then even if he woke up, he would still be an idiot. The more likely conclusion was that his sea of consciousness would shatter, and in this process, he would noiselessly die. It was very obvious that the Tianhai Divine Empress did not care if he could endure this or not. She was only doing what she wanted to do. With an indifferent expression, she coldly gazed into the rainy night, her right hand lightly caressing his head, continuing to bestow the most benevolent grace and the cruelest torture. Fortunately, perhaps because he had been tempered by the ocean of sword intent, perhaps because of Zhixio's example, perhaps because on that night many days ago in the autumn forest of the 100-herb garden, the Tianhai Divine Empress had once placed a drop of tea on his forehead, or perhaps because there had always been a tinge of unwillingness in the very depths of Chen Chongqing's soul, he had endured. After what seemed like countless long nights, he woke up. Some remnants of that majestic strength and the ancientness still continued to travel back and forth in his body. The process was already over, but the pain still persisted. Countless extremely cold and real little knives indifferently traversed through his body, continuing to scrape at his bones and flesh, his mind and his will. He was in extreme pain, and that was sourness. He felt like from his head to his toes, every part of his body was being greedily gnawed at by countless ants. He had no strength, not even able to open his eyes. He could only perform meditative introspection. His spiritual sense moved, beginning to observe the changes in his body. It was a somewhat familiar scene, but it had already undergone a massive transformation. The lake suspended in the sky was still clear, the spirit mountain silent and lonely. The gate to the ethereal palace was already wide open, several yellow leaves on the stone steps in front of the gate. It seemed like it had been a very long time since anyone had come. The wasteland was covered in a thin layer of snow, very loose, as if all it needed was a gust of wind to blow it away. It should have been the radiance of the stars that had just fallen. In the original location of the snowy plains, there was a gradually melting snow water slowly flowing through the plains. Those thin snow water converged into a stream, then into a river, continuing forward. In front of him, there were no broken cliffs, no dried-up riverbeds, and certainly no endless abyss. There was only a flat plain. There was still a chapter tonight. Chapter 643. What did this mean? Could it be that those severed and blocked meridians had already been mended? Chen Chongqing gazed at the scene before him, shocked, speechless. Countless great rivers flowed freely through the plains, irrigating the rice fields on their bank. In the plains, one could also see many lakes, some large and some small, densely dotted like the stars in the sky. The clear and elegant mountains and rivers, the beautiful scenery, the myriad phenomena, all of them were currently within his body. Turned out that normal meridians were like this. Turned out that a perfect qi opening was like this. It turned out that when true qi flowed through the meridians, it should have been smooth and smooth like this, and not as stagnant and difficult as he had always felt. Chen Chongqing stared in a daze. Before he had time to feel joy, he began to feel sorrow. Yes, he was still alive, and from the looks of it, he would live even better than before. His illness seemed to have truly been cured. There were no more curses. Destiny had been knocked to the ground. Although he was still in meditative introspection, he could already sense that his body had become much lighter, as if countless burdens had been lifted. The horizon before his eyes no longer contained that shadow that had been inseparable from him for 7 years. There was only great rivers and mountains, endless light. He opened his eyes. He saw her figure. Her hands held behind her, she stood at the edge of the divine path, gazing at the night sky, her clothes slightly damp. In the distant rainy night, a final thick bolt of lightning descended, illuminating the entire mausoleum of books, and also making her figure abnormally large and tall. He didn't know what to say. Except thank you. The Tianhai Divine Empress's reply was very blunt, as if she had just casually done a trivial thing. But why was that? We saved you not because you are our son, nor because of those 3 squirrels, but because we do not like that sort of you. Then why did Our Lady save me? We are the will, and you are our son. You are the continuation of our will. I don't understand. The Tianhai Divine Empress did not give a specific explanation. Her actions had never required any explanation, even if the target was him. We heard you say that your illness cannot be cured, that it is fate. Chen Chongqing was silent. He truly had said these words, to Su Yorong, to the little black dragon, to himself many times. Even if it really is your fate, if we do not let you die, you cannot die. The Tianhai Divine Empress said. At Mount Han, Su Yorong had said that she would not let him die. At the bottom of New North Bridge, the little black dragon had also said that she would not let him die. The feeling the Tianhai Divine Empress gave, when she said these words, was naturally very different. Because when she said she could do it, even if her opponent was called fate. I believe in fate, but I have never respected it. The Tianhai Divine Empress gazed at the starry sky, expressionlessly saying, Since I want to defy the heavens and change fate, I naturally cannot respect it, only use it. Chen Chongqing recalled the first sentence that Wang Jisoo had written in his notebook. They were all truly extraordinary people. Their attitudes towards fate might be a little different, but they were essentially the same. At this time, the wind and rain stopped, the night clouds gradually dispersed, revealing the true appearance of the stars, but the fate hidden behind them was unknown. The Tianhai Divine Empress gazed at the starry sky and said, If the heavenly Tao wants you to die, we want you to live. If the heavenly Tao says that you do not die, we want to die. Then we will fight with it and see just who is stronger. She then drew back her gaze and gazed at the world outside the mausoleum of books. As for these people, in the end, they are nothing more than jumping clowns. With these words, a wind curled around the mausoleum of books, blowing up a corner of her robe. She was still standing on the peak of the mausoleum of books, but Chen Chongqing felt like she had already gone 1,000 li away. Tens of thousands of li away, in Xining village, in the dead of night, the small stream gurgled. Fish quietly rested in the crevices of the rocks. Flower petals drifted down from upstream, circling around a pair of bare feet that were as white as jade, no longer leaving. The monk lowered his head, gazing pensively at the flowers and fish in the clear stream. The sound of footsteps came from the stream bank. It was very calm, very soothing, yet it seemed to contain countless storms and thunder. The fish at the bottom of the stream scattered in fright, burrowing deeper into the crevices, yet they could not find a path. They constantly collided against the sharp edges of the rocks, drawing blood. The fish blood dispersed in the stream, dyeing those flower petals dark red. Those flower petals left his bare feet and met in the small eddies on the surface of the stream. The monk pondered for a few moments, then raised his head to look at the other side of the stream, his expression very solemn. The Tianhai Divine Empress held her hands behind her back and stood by the stream bank, expressionlessly gazing at him. To her soul, the distance of tens of thousands of li could be traversed with a single thought. The monk raised his left foot from the stream and bent it under his body. The thumb of his left hand joined with the ring thumb, seeming to touch but not to touch, forming a lotus seal. In his right hand was a string of dark brown prayer beads, slowly turning on their own. As the prayer beads moved, the true meaning of time was preserved. He gazed at the Tianhai Divine Empress, his lips slightly parted as he began to chant. The scripture he chanted was rather special. It was not a common Taoist scripture, but rather a rather cryptic character. The tone was also rather strange, its rise and fall having its own rhythm. This was a Buddhist hymn. The legacy of the Buddhist sect on this continent had long since been severed, but the Tianhai Divine Empress had some understanding of this. The black hair by her temples moved despite the lack of wind, as if she was pondering something. As the Buddhist hymn rose, the flower petals in the eddies on the surface of the stream began to fuse even tighter, gradually merging into lotus flowers. An extremely clear, sacred light gradually seeped out from the layers upon layers of flower petals. The Tianhai Divine Empress stood by the stream bank, yet she seemed to be standing high up in the night sky. What had come to Xining village was not her true body, but the projection of her soul in space, moving with her spiritual will, incomparably tall. An indescribable pressure exuded from her body. Her eyes became abnormally bright, like real stars. The lotus flowers in the stream gradually left the eddies and drifted in all directions. A few drifted towards her, but even more drifted towards the other side of the stream. The monk's expression turned even more solemn. The prayer beads in his hand rotated even more slowly, as though mountains were moving between his palms. The stream became absolutely still, no longer showing any signs of flowing. The trees by the stream also seemed to want to become still, but they were suddenly blown about by the furious wind and swayed. The Tianhai Divine Empress looked at the monk and said, "Since you dared to return, then don't think about leaving again." The thousands of families were still asleep, but the Taoist was still awake. He gazed in the direction of the mausoleum of books, a hint of solemnity appearing on his face, and then he turned and left. The rain had already lightened. He turned and walked into the darkness, his destination unknown. In the next moment, his figure appeared by the Bridge of Helplessness on the Luo River. He took out a very exquisite and small hourglass from his sleeve and placed it on the railing. The passage of time was noiseless and often very easy to overlook, until all sorts of tools of measurement appeared. The hourglass was unquestionably the most primitive tool of measuring time, but it was precisely because it was primitive that it was reliable. The Taoist calmly gazed at the hourglass, knowing that in another 27 breaths, his opponent would be able to confirm his true position. A thin stream of sand poured down from the upper half of the hourglass. Just when it was about to completely drain away, the Taoist vanished once more. Right after he vanished, a cold chi appeared on the bridge of helplessness. The Luo River responded, rippling and then rapidly calming. A few shards of ice even appeared on the surface of the river. A black shadow appeared where the Taoist had previously stood. It was the Rui at the Tianhai Divine Empress's waist. An extremely powerful soul seemed to be concealed within the Rui. It was no longer an inanimate object and was currently searching for the Taoist. In that cold cave at the bottom of New North Bridge, a black-clothed girl was sleeping. For some reason, the cinnabar wound between her eyebrows seemed particularly bright. At this time, the Taoist had already arrived outside a mutton bun shop on the northwest side of the capital. He glanced at the hourglass in his hand and knew that this time, he could only stay for 23 breaths of time. The time needed for the Tianhai Divine Empress to confirm his true position was getting shorter and shorter. This also meant that she was getting closer and closer to discovering his true position. If she could confirm the Taoist's position, she would assuredly kill him with all her strength. The Tianhai Divine Empress stood at the peak of the Mausoleum of Books, calmly gazing in the direction of the Li Palace. A very long time had passed tonight, and it would not be long until dawn. Yet the Li Palace had remained extremely quiet. The old man who lived there, the old man that she had to treat with caution, had never made a single sound. Zhu Luo, Guanshinka, Biyanghong, Wuqiong Bai, these powerful figures who had arrived with the storm had all heard the Tianhai Divine Empress's voice. The 15 princes of the Chen clan that had taken advantage of the darkness to sneak into the capital, as well as those already restless opponents, had also heard her voice. The voice was very indifferent, but it was also peerlessly tyrannical. Previously, Taoist Ji had said that she did not dare to eat Chen Chongqing because she was timid, afraid to gamble, afraid of the existence of the heavenly Tao. Yet she actually disdained to use the fruit that was Chen Chongqing to gamble on the direction of the heavenly Tao. She wanted to gamble with the heavenly Tao. Besides a few experts, no one knew that the Divine Empress's soul had already traveled tens of thousands of li. Her most powerful magical artifact was currently searching the streets of the capital for traces of her enemies. As the crowd watched her quietly stand with her hands held behind her at the peak of the Mausoleum of Books, they felt an irrepressible tremble in the depths of their hearts. That place was the highest point of the capital, the highest point of the world, because she had already stood there for more than 200 years. In the distance, the ground suddenly began to tremble. The accumulated rainwater began to splash into the air, scattering in all directions. The plains rumbled with thunder. Occasionally, a bolt of lightning would flash there, illuminating the indistinct figures of countless cavalry. The thunder was real, and it was also the sound of hoof. Besides Snowhold Pass and the other fortresses in the north that needed to be heavily defended, tens of thousands of the Great Zhou's most elite cavalry, under the command of 11 divine generals, were advancing towards the capital. They were all the Tianhai Divine Empress's most loyal subordinates in her reign over this world, as well as her most powerful military force. On October 7th, the Shanghai Book City will be holding a book signing for the simplified version of Heaven's Chosen Record. If everyone has the time, come and play. There is a place to register on the front page of Qidian. Chapter 644. The tens of thousands of Great Zhou cavalry were still on their way from the various provinces and counties to the capital, still very far from the Mausoleum of Books, but Wuqiong Bai's expression had already changed. As an expert of the divine domain, one of the storms of the 8 directions, her strength was extremely profound. She could easily see that terrifying army in the distant plains, and she could also see the red falcons and red geese flying through the rain clouds like lightning bolt. So it was Tianhai's scheme. We must leave. She turned to her husband, her face pale. The horsetail whisk soaked by the rain drooped weakly in the crook of her elbow, just like her spirit. Tonight, the two sides had still not formally begun fighting, so it was impossible to determine the situation. However, the Tian High Divine Empress's calm and confidence had already caused her to lose all confidence. She could not forget the distant attack the Tian High Divine Empress had launched at her on the Dew platform in the capital. In the depths of her heart, she simply did not have the courage to directly confront her. Courage was something that could only be accumulated after more than 10 years of humiliation and sleepless nights. However, it was usually only a matter of an instant to lose it. Seeing that powerful figure at the peak of the mausoleum of books, the princes from the various provinces and counties all paled. Some of them, like Wuqiongbai, felt the urge to retreat. The situation truly was not clear, but there was one thing that was extremely clear. Tonight's scheme that should have been planned by Daoist Ji had now become the Tian High Divine Empress's scheme. Since the Tian High Divine Empress already knew everything, just who could defeat her. Yet now, even if they wanted to leave, it was already too late. As the cry of an eagle resounded over the capital, various places in the capital suddenly reacted. There was a loud bang. In the autumn forest of the capital's Garden of Harmony, the soaked ground caved in, revealing a large hole. Sand and stone fell and a spring gushed out. As the spring gushed out, a statue of a sage from a previous generation, carved from obsidian. The surface of the stone statue was covered in mud, which was gradually washed away by the spring water, revealing its true appearance. It also began to gradually emit a majestic power. In the middle of South Red House Street, a crack appeared. It was about 3 feet wide, bottomless, and incomparably deep. However, what came from the depths of the crack was not a cold aura, but an incomparably hot aura. It was as if there was a copper furnace at the very bottom of the crack that never went out. The rainwater on the street flowed into the crack and instantly evaporated, turning into mist. In a few breaths of time, this famous street that was famous for its tranquility had turned into a fairyland shrouded in clouds and mist. It was so beautiful that it seemed as if it did not belong to the mortal world. However, the blazing hot aura in the mist was actually announcing the dangers within. In the third house in the north of White Paper District, accompanied by cracking sounds, the beams of all the buildings seemed to have been invaded by 1,000 years of time. They were corroded by insects and wind, decaying and collapsing at a speed visible to the naked eye, turning into dust. Only the foundation was left. It was an extremely ancient path made of brick. The only well in the courtyard had also collapsed. In the ruins of the well, the water surged up and poured into the shallow path in the foundation of the building, turning the foundation into a canal. An extremely cold and somber chi rose from the canal into the night sky. In the north of Achievement of Merit, there was a mound the size of a small mountain. After several centuries of care, it was now covered in pine and cypress trees and green grass. It looked very beautiful, and many commoners of the capital would choose this place to play. They had long since forgotten that several centuries ago, this place had once been a great tomb. With a crack, a bolt of lightning descended from the sky and struck the small mound. The thickest pine tree was struck by the lightning. Green smoke rose from it and then it slowly collapsed. The pine tree fell on the mound, sending up mud and smashing apart the autumn grass. Soon after, the small mound gradually split apart, revealing the true scene within. There was no coffin inside, nor were there any funerary objects. There were only countless bones. These bones belonged to the palace maids who had volunteered to be buried with Emperor Taizong when he died. But now, sensing the venomous and cold chi of the great tomb, perhaps the word volunteering needed to be discussed again. This venomous and cold chi did not affect the people of the capital around the north of Achievement of Merit in the slightest. This was because a powerful chi had emerged from the deepest underground river at the base of the mound. Like a cool breeze, it easily washed away the resentment and purified the bones. This chi soared into the sky and into the night sky, exuding a faint golden luster. It was brilliant and dignified, divine and dignified. All over the capital, strange phenomena like this were taking place. Stone carvings were used as the foundation, or the earth was cracked and fire was ignited, or the springs were reversed and turned into soup, or the majestic appearance of imperial chi. Countless powerful chis soared into the sky, piercing through the leaden clouds into the night sky, or dazzling enough to suppress the radiance of the stars. Gradually, they formed a majestic and magnificent array. This array could not be seen, but the cultivators could clearly feel it. They instantly felt as insignificant as dust and a boundless reverence. To the north of the white paper district, the spring water that had poured into the foundation had transformed into the famous golden soup of the Orthodoxy's 7 territories, but it was only an extremely unremarkable small part of this array. The imperial chi of the north of achievement of merit had broken through the tomb and cleansed the bones into the 9 heavens, suddenly descending upon the imperial palace. The Lingyan pavilion, which had remained tightly shut for several centuries and was as dark as the night, now began to emit milky white rays of light. At the same time, an incomparably tyrannical, dignified, and righteous chi appeared in everyone's perception. This was the first ranked of the legendary weapons that had not appeared in the world for many years, the Frost God's Spear. Sensing the chi of the Frost God's Spear and the change in the Lingyan pavilion, Bi Yanghong's expression finally turned grave and stern. The little red flower hanging from his pinky suddenly stopped swaying and floated in the wind. There was a river surrounding the mausoleum of books. Suddenly, all the water in the river vanished. It had not dried up, but seemed to have been absorbed by the earth. 70-some heavenly tome monoliths appeared at the bottom of the river, like a forest of stones. The monoliths exuded a solemn chi. The rain clouds that had originally dispersed into the surroundings seemed to be summoned by the great array of the capital and gradually flowed back. Although they did not completely block out the starlight, they still somewhat dimmed the multitude of stars. The awe-inspiring array intent was like countless sharp swords, seemingly intent on severing all the laws of the world. The strength hidden within was enough to kill an expert of the divine domain. Wuqiong Bai's face was already very pale, the viciousness on her face long ago replaced by fear. Guan Xingke remained silent, the bamboo hat concealing his ordinary and unremarkable face, also concealing his true mood. "This is the imperial design?" Zhu Luo's expression suddenly changed. Gazing at the peak of the mausoleum of books, he asked in disbelief, "You're not from the imperial clan, so what gives you the right?" There was still one more chapter tonight. Chapter 645. What was the royal family? From this perspective, it was not difficult to understand why the Tianhai Divine Empress was able to awaken the imperial design. But Zhu Luo had been friends with the Chen imperial clan for several centuries, so he knew many secrets. He knew that in order to use the imperial design, one had to possess true imperial blood. The Tianhai Divine Empress had ruled for more than 200 years, but she had only been on the throne for 20 years. She simply did not have the time to have the imperial design admit that her blood was imperial blood. From the peak of the mausoleum of books, she gazed at the world, gazed at the great array in the capital. Her beautiful face was devoid of emotion, indifferent to the extreme. Yes, she was not surnamed Chen, and what flowed through her body was the true blood of the heavenly phoenix, not the imperial blood. She also did not have enough time to make the imperial design surrender, but this did not mean that she had no other methods. Taoist Ji was also very clear that she definitely had a way, so he did not question her like Zhu Luo. In fact, in the next moment, many people, including Zhu Luo, thought of that. The great array of the imperial design had been constructed many years ago and had an incomparably long history. At the very least, it was even older than the history of the Chen imperial clan. The capital was now the capital of the Great Zhou dynasty, but before the Great Zhou dynasty, this was already the capital. Before the Chen imperial clan, There was another imperial clan with an extremely pure bloodline on this continent, and it had continued to exist until now. Zhu Lua looked in the direction of the imperial palace and harshly said, "Liang Wangsun, you actually dare to commit such a treasonous act. There are 3 tallest places in the capital: the Mausoleum of Books and the Dew Platform, as well as the Lingyan Pavilion." The Lingyan Pavilion was located in the depths of the imperial palace. It was a tall building. The most important modification the great Zhou imperial clan had made to the array of the imperial design was the construction of the Lingyan Pavilion. Chen Shu was also in this pavilion. Liang Wangsun sat in the middle of the ascending mist pavilion. Tonight, he did not hold the Vajra pestle in his hand. Instead, he held a torch. The material of the torch was neither gold nor jade. It was sparkling and translucent, with a white flame burning at the top. This was the divine artifact of the demon race, White Sun Flame. Liang Wangsun's eyes were tightly shut and his face was pale. The hand that held the torch was bleeding profusely. The blood that flowed onto the White Sun Flame did not continue to drip to the ground. Instead, it was absorbed. The rays of light released by the White Sun Flames were not dyed blood-red. They were still pure and holy, as if they contained boundless energy. Those rays of light were so intense that the Lingyan Pavilion, which was always so gloomy, also became bright tonight. As for the interior of the Pavilion of Ascending Mist, it was even more brightly illuminated, as if it was daytime, or perhaps it was more like the imagined divine kingdom. The portraits on the wall were very clearly illuminated. The portraits of the founding ministers seemed to be quietly looking at Liang Wangsun. If they knew that this young prince was the descendant of the Liang imperial family that they had worked so hard to overthrow, it was unknown how emotional they would be. Who would the legends in these portraits be willing to bless? Over the past several hundred years, the Lingyan Pavilion had always remained silent in the depths of the imperial palace. It was like the darkness of the night, never letting people easily see it. Tonight it became brighter and brighter. In the past several hundred years, the stone steps and plaza in front of the Lingyan Pavilion had never been visited. Tonight, however, these places were filled with people. The imperial guards looked around warily. Xue Xingchuan sat on the red cloud Qilin, his expression indifferent as he looked forward. It was pitch black in front of them. That was the main gate of the imperial city. Tonight, the gate of the imperial city was not closed, as if preparing to welcome guests. At this moment, the frost god's spear was exuding an incomparably tyrannical and powerful qi within the imperial palace. He was here. Then, who dared to enter? On this rainy night of early autumn, those who opposed the Tianhai Divine Empress came from all over the continent to the capital, intending to overthrow her rule in one fell swoop. But there were also many people who were willing to swear loyalty to the Tianhai Divine Empress. Besides important generals of the great Zhou army like Xue Xingchuan, there were also a few people hidden in the darkness. Perhaps it was as the Tang's second master had said, after the Battle of Mount Han, the Elder of Heavenly Secrets was truly unable to resist the wear of time and was on the verge of death. However, the Tianhai Divine Empress, who possessed the friendship of the Elder of Heavenly Secrets, naturally also possessed the assistance of the entire Pavilion of Heavenly Secrets. In the first half of the night, Chen Chongqing had broken into the alley of the Northern Military Department and directly destroyed the crabapple tree courtyard, but the operations of the department for purging officials had not been too affected. The moment Zhou Tong woke up, he forcefully endured his injuries and ordered his subordinates to join forces with the assassins of the Pavilion of Heavenly Secret. They began to move stealthily through the darkness, ready to attack their targets at any moment. Borrowing the guidance and concealment of the imperial design, several hundred elite assassins had already arrived outside the mansions of the nobles, approaching the carriages of the 15 princes from the various provinces. With a single order, the assassins would cleanse the divine empress of those ministers and descendants that dared to be disloyal to her, The person that could give the order was naturally the Tian-Hai Divine Empress herself. Right now, she only needed a word, or even a glance, for the capital to welcome a bloodbath. The process might be rather difficult, but it seemed like the conclusion was already decided. In terms of cause and effect, the fruit that was Chun Chongxing was actually the cause in this matter. Her opponents were waiting for her to suffer the backlash of the heavenly Tao or fall into a trap, all of them coming to the capital. Those enemies that had hidden in the darkness for 200 years, those old friends that had endured for so many years, she had long since wanted to see them again. After tonight, all her enemies would be killed by her, and then she could be free to do her own things. This was the result she wanted. Besides this, everything that happened tonight had no meaning to her, nor did it affect her in any way. Even her borrowing the majestic power of the world, and the ancient chi of the Mausoleum of Books to help Chun Chongxing defy the heavens and change his fate seemed like a trivial matter. The drizzle of the night fell without sound, and it also seemed like it had no substance, only an extremely faint wetness. She held her hands behind her and gazed at the capital in the darkness, her expression calm. Only Chun Chongxing behind her could faintly see that her hands were faintly trembling. On a certain street in the capital, a heart-wrenching wail suddenly resounded. "Mother, you can do so much for your little brother, your son is also your son." Of the 15 royal carriages that had entered the capital in the darkness, a man flipped out from one of them. This man was dressed in a light yellow robe, his face ugly, his expression abnormally sincere. He incessantly kowtowed in the direction of the Mausoleum of Books, tears streaming down his face as he said, "Mother, please spare me, your child was deceived by someone, no, your child was tricked into coming here." In this short sentence, this man's attitude towards the Tian-Hai Divine Empress was completely different, and he had even changed the way he addressed himself 3 times, making those who heard him want to cover their ears. This man was the Prince of Luoyang, famed for his mediocrity and incompetence. One could say that this prince had no sense of honor, but there was truly no one who believed that he was lying. Ever since he was a child, he had been timid and afraid of trouble. Given his usual habits, he would never have dared to participate in a major event like 10 some rebellious princes entering the capital. He truly had been tricked into coming to the capital. Only upon entering the capital did the Prince of Luoyang realize what he had to do tonight. His entire body trembled in fear, and when he saw the Tian-Hai Divine Empress easily control the situation, he was so frightened that his legs went soft. He did not dare to remain, but he could not leave. In his terror, he hurriedly climbed out of the carriage and kneeled on the ground to beg for mercy. Soon after, 2 or 3 princes recalled the Divine Empress's former dignified bearing and also walked out of their carriages and endlessly kowtowed in the direction of the Mausoleum of Books. But even more princes were loudly cursing at the Mausoleum of Books. Coming to the capital tonight, they had long ago cast aside their lives. For a moment, phrases like Demon Empress and Die resounded everywhere. The Tian-Hai Divine Empress stood at the peak of the Mausoleum of Books, gazing at her nominal sons and slightly arching her brows. In truth, she no longer had a very deep impression of the Prince of Luoyang. She only remembered that this son was very stupid, and as for the other sons, she was extremely displeased. She rebuked, "When I see trash like you, I feel sorry for the late emperor. He gave birth to so many, but not a single one of them has any prospects." She was lecturing these princes of the Chun clan, so all the princes of the Chun clan could hear her voice, whether it was in the capital or on the official road from Luoyang to the capital. On that official road flanked by weeds, the Prince of Xiang propped up the fat on his waist and panted for breath as he walked to the front of the carriage. Looking in the direction of the capital, he yelled, "Mother, I can do it, I have prospects. Your son was so filial to mother back then. I picked all the wildflowers in the 100-herb garden and placed them in vases for mother, washed all the fruits and sent them to mother's bed. Whatever mother wanted to play, I played with mother. The more he spoke, the more aggrieved he felt. Clutching his chest, he resentfully said, "Even now, Chen Chongqing is probably not even willing to call me mother. If mother is willing to bestow so much benevolence to such an unfilial son, why can't mother treat your son a little better? I'm also mother's son, so mother should just let me be the crown prince." When this extremely shameless statement fell into the ears of the attendants of the princely estates on the official road, they all felt very embarrassed and didn't know how to react. Far away at the peak of the mausoleum of books, the Tianhai Divine Empress's fiendish look on her face somewhat lessened. She said, "You can be considered the most promising." Hearing this voice in the night sky, the Prince of Xiang's face brimmed with joy and found it difficult to restrain himself. The Tianhai Divine Empress replied, "But you're too fat, too ugly, like a pig." The sincere and affectionate conversation between the Tianhai Divine Empress and the Prince of Xiang after 20 years made many of the princes that had already arrived in the capital laugh, and then fall absolutely silent. The Prince of Luoyang paid no attention to these things. Taking his attendants and companions with him, he took advantage of the darkness to circle around a side alley that he had been familiar with since his childhood. He did not follow the plan they had agreed upon and go directly to the observation platform, but instead headed in a certain direction. "Your Highness, where are we going?" "To the Orange Garden," the Prince of Luoyang replied, his face pale. He was one of the last Chen princes to be driven out of the capital. He had the opportunity to get to know Mou, and their relationship could be considered pretty good. In such a dangerous moment, the first thing he thought of was to find her and beg her to save his life. He had never imagined that Mou would not be in the capital at this time. At such an important moment, as the Divine Empress's most trusted and trusted right-hand woman, there was no reason for Grand Lady Mou not to be present. Yet she really was not here. The gate to the Orange Garden was closed and the little orange lantern in front of the gate was not lit. The Prince of Luoyang's face paled even more as he thought what to do. "Your Highness, where do we go next?" The Prince of Luoyang clenched his teeth and said, "To the Imperial Palace. Grand Lady Mou should be there. The Prince of Luoyang is going to ask for mooncakes to eat. Everyone should also eat some. I very much like this person. I wish everyone a happy holiday." Chapter 646. With the movement of the imperial design, the army was about to return. In the blink of an eye, the situation underwent countless transformations and the capital once more fell under the control of the Divine Empress. She stood at the peak of the mausoleum of books and looked at a certain place in the capital. "What are you doing here?" After the head of the Qiushan clan and the guardian entered the capital, they had always been very quiet and low-key. It was very easy for people to forget their existence, but since the Tianhai Divine Empress had spoken, they could not continue to pretend that they did not exist. "This entire matter has nothing to do with my Qiushan family." The Qiushan clan head gazed at the peak of the mausoleum of books, his expression abnormally humble as he said, "It is good to let the Empress know that we have come to the capital in preparation to appreciate maples." No one believed this explanation. It was particularly clumsy, even stupid, but that did not matter because the Tianhai Divine Empress only needed an explanation, an attitude. The Qiushan clan head's attitude was very proper. The more stupid his reason was, the more proper his attitude was. The Tianhai Divine Empress was rather satisfied. Turning to the other two seats in the capital, she asked, "And you too? Are you also here to appreciate the maples?" A carriage was parked in front of the Qianqing gate. The old lady of the Mutuo clan stood beside the carriage with a dragon-headed walking stick in her hand. This old matriarch's small feet were wrapped. However, when she landed on the rain-soaked street, she was like a nail. She did not tremble at all, but her voice trembled. "It's just that I haven't been to the capital for a long time, so I came to the north to take a look. I also have some matters to take care of so that your Highness knows that my great-granddaughter-in-law is about to give birth." The gate of Dishing was tightly shut. The head of the Wu clan stood in front of the gate and earnestly explained to the Mausoleum of Books, "Empress, please do not misunderstand. I have come to see my son-in-law." It was also a clumsy and stupid explanation, but it was different from the Qiushan clan heads, because these two reasons mentioned a person. The old matriarch of the Mutuo clan and the head of the Wu clan left the capital in the night. The Tianhai Divine Empress said nothing, her thoughts inscrutable. Did she feel that the attitudes of these two clans were not proper enough, or was she thinking about the Tang clan, the only clan of the four great clans that had not appeared? However, none of this mattered. Even if the four great clans expressed their stance, it was impossible to change the current situation. She didn't kill Chen Chongsheng, nor did she eat Chen Chongsheng. No matter how unfathomable the trap that the Taoist priest set up in the darkness of night was, it couldn't affect her anymore. The imperial design had already been activated, its awe-inspiring qi enveloping the entire capital. Besides Taoist Ji and the old lady of the Mutuo clan and the head of the Wu clan, who had never dared to take a single step into the capital, no one was able to leave. Not even the four divine domain experts in front of the Mausoleum of Book. Her great Zhou cavalry was currently advancing towards the capital. There were still many officials and generals loyal to her in the capital. The outcome had been decided. Now, all that was left was to wait for her order. At this moment, a voice rang out through the capital. The voice was very soft, as if it was muttering to itself. Then, it gradually rose, turning into some kind of sharp interrogation. There was also some laughter mixed in it. The sarcasm was very strong, but gradually, you felt that it was self-mockery. It contained infinite emotion and awe towards certain things. Finally, everything returned to silence. Such a complex voice and emotions were actually just a very short sentence. "Do you think you've really won?" The speaker was Taoist Ji. He stood in front of a remote street in the capital, his feet treading on the somewhat filthy sewage. Behind him was a lamb shop that reeked of blood. Meat shops were often the first places in a city to wake up. It was already very late at night, and before dawn, the first to light up were the lights in the shop. Chop, chop, chop. The clear sound of meat being cut came from the shop. The people in the meat shop did not know about the awe-inspiring array of the imperial design nearby, nor did they know that a person was standing outside the shop. Taoist Ji gazed in the direction of the Mausoleum of Books and sighed, "I always thought that tonight was a trap that I arranged for you, but now I know that it wasn't." At the peak of the Mausoleum of Books, Chen Chongsheng gazed at the scene in the darkness, at his master. His emotions were still as perplexed as before, but there was also an indescribable feeling. Perhaps it was because the Tianhai Divine Empress was standing in front of him and she had just changed his fate? But this is also not your trap. I am a player in the trap, and you are also a player in the trap. This is still a trap. This is not a trap that I arranged, nor is it a trap that you arranged. This is a trap that the Heavenly Tao arranged for us. A trap of the Heavenly Tao. Chen Chongsheng did not understand what these words meant. The Tianhai Divine Empress indifferently said, "You're still the same as you were several hundred years ago, always fond of saying these seemingly profound and incomprehensible words. In the end, a swindler is still a swindler. You want to use these words to shake our will? There's no trap of the Heavenly Tao, it's just a little scheme of yours." Correct, this was my trap, and it should have been perfect. Whether you chose to kill him or eat him, I had prepared a corresponding method, but I did not expect that you would choose to save him, because I did not expect that a woman as cold and emotionless as you would actually have a moment where your heart would soften. And I did not expect even more that you had already entered the concealed divinity realm. Taoist Ji's voice mixed with the sound of meat being cut from the meat shop. It was not muffled, but rather exceptionally clear, echoing through the peak of the Mausoleum of Books. Besides this, no other sound could be heard in the entire capital. The Li Palace was silent, the Mausoleum of Books was silent. The Divine Empress had already entered the concealed divinity realm? Many people had guessed at this, but tonight they finally received confirmation. This news would still shock the entire continent. You truly are very strong. Even if you eat Chen Chongqing's fruit, even if the starry sky really does send down a divine punishment, it still might not be able to injure your foundation. Taoist Ji's voice echoed through the darkness. A chilly wind blew over the peak of the mausoleum of books, ruffling the Tianhai Divine Empress's black hair. She quietly stood there, standing at the highest point of the world, like a demon god, giving off an aura of invincibility. Whether it was the nearby Chen Chongqing, the Wuqiongbai and Guanshinka at the base of the mausoleum of books, or the monk by the stream tens of thousands of li away, they all faintly had a certain thought. Even if the heavenly Tao changed, even if fate flowed chaotically, even if lightning fell on her body, she would not care. The only thing that can injure your foundation, that can weaken you, is yourself. With the sound of meat being cut from the butcher's shop, Taoist Ji's voice became tough and callous. In your view, your will is more important than the heavenly Tao and also more powerful. When the heavenly Tao wants you to kill him, you insist on keeping him alive. I have to admit that your self-confidence is still as impressive as ever, but have you ever thought, when you vainly attempt to place your will above the heavenly Tao, what sort of answer will the heavenly Tao give? The Tianhai Divine Empress replied, "We have never cared about the thoughts of others, not even this starry sky." Taoist Ji's voice was very sorrowful. "So, you chose to save him?" The Tianhai Divine Empress asked, "So what if I saved him? You are perfect and powerful. We originally had no chance of victory, but tonight you chose to change his fate. I believe that for this you also paid a great price." Taoist Ji's voice became callous and unyielding. "For example, your cultivation has already fallen, you are no longer invincible, and this is the heavenly Tao's answer to you." Hearing these words, the countless people hidden in the darkness of the capital began to ponder in shock. Was what Taoist Ji said true? In order to bring Chen Chongqing back from the edge of the abyss of death, had the Tianhai Divine Empress really paid such a great price? Chen Chongqing gazed at the Tianhai Divine Empress's back, at the two hands held behind her. His mood was somewhat strange, his mind somewhat dazed. The chilly night wind blew through the streets, carrying away the remaining warmth and the faint scent of blood. After a moment of silence, the Tianhai Divine Empress's voice rang out. It was very cold, very condescending, and carried a hint of faint ridicule. "The things we want to do, you mortals will never be able to understand." She gazed at the world shrouded in darkness and said, "Not even the so-called heavenly Tao can grasp our thoughts." These words were not tyrannical, but they faintly revealed absolute confidence. She did not deny Taoist Ji's words. In order to repair Chen Chongqing's meridians and change his fate, even though she had long since entered the concealed divinity realm, she had still paid a great price. So just where did her confidence come from? "Yes, I was wrong just now. Empress, you did not hesitate to lower your cultivation in order to save him. It is naturally not because of such a laughable reason as a loving mother taking pity on her child." Taoist Ji stood on the rainy street, calmly gazing at the peak of the mausoleum of books. "You want to use this action to go against the blood oath you swore when sacrificing to the starry sky, to wipe away the shadow left on your heart by the 4 words defying the heavens and changing fate. Only in this way can you have the chance to obtain true freedom." Not everyone was able to understand this short conversation. Only experts of the divine domain like Zhu Luo or experts who had already seen that threshold could understand its true meaning. The Tianhai Divine Empress was the strongest expert on the continent, possessing an unimaginably powerful will. Her only weakness, the gap in her heart, lay in the oath she swore when sacrificing to the starry sky for the sake of changing fate. This did not refer to the oath itself, but to the act itself. Just as she had said to Chen Chongqing, back then, She had once lowered her head to the heavenly Tao. What she needed to do now was to wipe away that old matter, to cover her heart with that layer of dust. She wanted Chen Chongqing to live. If she could do this, then she would be perfect, no longer having any weaknesses. In this state, even if she fell from the concealed divinity realm to the saint realm, she would still be undefeatable. The Tianhai Divine Empress said, "You think too much and talk too much. This will only make things very boring." Taoist Ji asked, "Is that so? Then if I say that Chen Chongqing is actually not the Empress's son, wouldn't it be a little more interesting?" His voice was very calm, devoid of emotion, and so it seemed especially cruel. In the deepest room of a street store, a thick knife of oil fell heavily on a chopping board. Lamb meat was incessantly cut open, spraying blood everywhere. October 7th, the signing of the simplified version of Heaven's Choosing Diary will be held at the Shanghai Book City. Registration is required. The address is on the home page of the starting point. A friend has asked me if I will be there. Dear, this is a signing, how can I not be there? I won't be there today, but tomorrow there will be 2 chapters, and then I will begin to prepare for my departure. Chapter 647. Whether it was the mausoleum of books or the streets of the capital, they all fell into a deathly stillness. Many people opened their mouths in shock, and no one could say a word. People thought that they had heard wrongly, or that the whistling of the night wind had suddenly become faster, making them unable to hear it clearly. The Tianhai Divine Empress's eyes were very beautiful, bright like the stars, just like the eyes of a true phoenix. A ray of light flashed in her eyes, and her divine sense moved slightly. She gazed at a certain place in the mausoleum of books. She could not see it clearly, but she could see everything clearly. That feeling was still there. So it had always been there. So it was here. Crack! Several bolts of lightning, each as thick as a tree, fell from the night sky and landed around the peak of the mausoleum of books, illuminating everything with incomparable clarity. The dark clouds in the night sky rolled wildly, twisting incessantly as if there were countless dragons fighting within. It was as if the mysteries of heaven were about to move and the will of heaven was about to arrive. An extremely faint chi seeped out of the Tianhai Divine Empress's body. Faintly discernible, it pierced through the clouds and returned to the depths of the vast sky of stars that could not be seen with the naked eye. She looked up at the sky with an indifferent expression and said nothing. "What do you mean? Chen Chongqing isn't the son of the Divine Empress and Emperor Xian. Could he not be Crown Prince Xiaoming?" Following Taoist Ji's words, the entire capital sank into a boundless shock. When the rumor began last year, not many people believed it, but too many things happened later on, forcing people to believe it. The most crucial point was the attitude of the orthodoxy and the Divine Empress. For his sake, the imperial court and the orthodoxy had repeatedly confronted each other, and the 2 great powers were about to launch a decisive battle tonight. The Divine Empress had not hesitated to lower her cultivation to help him defy the heavens and change his fate, break the blood oath from the past and perfect his soul. But if he were not Crown Prince Xiaoming, then wouldn't all these things that the Divine Empress had done be meaningless? The person who was most shocked was obviously Chen Chongqing himself. An unknown source of strength made him stand up with difficulty. Using the scabbard to support his body, he gazed at the capital in the night. He wanted to see where his master was. He wanted to know what his master's words meant. The Tianhai Divine Empress did not turn her head, nor did she pay attention to him. The silence lasted for a very long time. His face became paler and paler, and his childish features were filled with frustration. Is this true? So, it was all fake. He suddenly understood. Yes, everything was fake. When the false becomes the true becomes the false. His master had lied to the entire world. Both the Divine Empress and himself had been deceived. The scroll of time might really be able to shorten time, but that didn't mean that it would definitely fall on him. Perhaps the canon of flowing west could change many things, but it could not change the fact that the great river would eventually flow west. In a very short period of time, Chen Chongqing had thought through many things, or even everything. Those were the things that he didn't understand, the things that Tang 36 didn't understand, the things that Su Yurong didn't understand, and at the same time they were worried about. Yes, if he really was Crown Prince Xiaoming, how could his master have allowed him to enter the capital and appear before the Divine Empress? 2.5 years ago, in the spring, he left Xining village and came to the capital. He couldn't break off the engagement, so he couldn't get into the Six Ivies. In the end, he entered the abandoned Tradition Academy. Whether or not the Pope knew at the time, whether or not the document MOU carried had anything to do with it, now that he thought about it, he had assuredly wanted to enter the Tradition Academy. Because his master was the previous principal of the Tradition Academy, it was easier for people to associate him with the fact that he was in the Tradition Academy. Did the Pope know of this matter from the very beginning? He probably didn't. What about Archbishop Meili Shah? He probably knew. That elderly archbishop sat in the plum-blossom-covered room of the Bureau of Ecclesiastic Education, shielding the Tradition Academy from the wind and rain, building bridges for Chen Chongqing. He allowed Chen Chongqing to grow and mature at an unimaginable speed. He said on the Divine Avenue that Chen Chongqing would take first rank of the first banner in the grand examination. He allowed Chen Chongqing to stand out above the forest, to enjoy limitless glory at the peak of danger. All of this was to make him even more striking, to make the Divine Empress discover him even faster and pay attention to him. Then, she would grow suspicious of him and begin to investigate him. Because he was Chen Chongqing, a legitimate successor of the orthodoxy, the principal of the Tradition Academy, a genius of cultivation, the successor of the orthodoxy. He was Crown Prince Xiaoming. Of course, all of this was fake. He was nothing. He was a fruit. He was only a fruit that was naturally poisonous. From the moment he was born, his fate had already been arranged. After he ripened, he would be eaten by someone. This was his destiny. Only when his destiny came to an end with time, and everything calmed down, would the true successor of the great Zhou dynasty walk onto the stage and receive all of this. Who was that person? Master? The Pope? Or the true Crown Prince Xiaoming? Chen Chongqing should be feeling sorrow, but he was not. He was already numb. He stared in a daze at the world beneath the mausoleum of books. If everything was fake, then what was real? Suddenly, he began to miss that old temple in Xining village. He wanted to go back and pretend that he had never come to the capital, that he and his senior were still babbling by the stream. Senior. Did he know of these things? Only now, including those 15 princes surnamed Shen that had infiltrated the capital in the darkness, did many people realize just what had happened. Amidst their shock, they began to ponder the blow this matter would deal to the Divine Empress and its effect on the entire situation. At the same time, they very naturally began to ponder a very important question. Since the Divine Empress had not reached perfection, it meant that Crown Prince Xiaoming was assuredly still alive. Chen Chongqing was not, so where was the true Crown Prince Xiaoming? This shocking piece of news spread countless times faster than Red Eagle. On the official road from Luoyang to the capital, the bloated Prince of Xiang suddenly shot up from the ground and loudly cursed in the direction of the capital. No one could clearly hear who he was cursing, Daoist Ji or Chen Chongqing, but his attendants were certain that he had not cursed a single word at the Divine Empress. Panting, he walked back to his imperial carriage and said, "After we enter the capital, investigate where my pitiful younger brother is." On the waterway from Jiangnan province to the capital, the Prince of Zhongshan issued a similar order to his subordinates, but he was much more direct than the Prince of Xiang. If you can hide it and kill it, then kill it. If you can't, then help this prince take the initiative to show your loyalty and pledge your allegiance. At this moment, countless princes had the same thought. The Prince of Xiang raised the curtain and gazed at the capital. The Prince of Zhongshan stood at the bow of the ship, gazing at the capital. They could not see what was going on at the peak of the mausoleum of books, but they felt like they could see it. Even they, who were extremely vicious and merciless, felt that the current Chen Chongsheng was very pitiful. At the same time, they felt that Principal Shang was very frightening. The clouds really did disperse. Chen Chongsheng searched for his master's figure in the darkness, but to no avail. He slowly lowered his head, the rain slowly dripping down his drenched hair. The Tianhai Divine Empress gazed at the vast sky of stars. After a very long time of silence, she finally said 4 words. So that's how it was. Then she drew back her gaze and gazed at the capital in the darkness, her voice tinged with derision. So what? There's another chapter at 8. Chapter 648. This is heaven's will. The starlight fell on the rainy street, turning into countless silver leaves. Taoist Ji stood amidst the myriad of silver leaves and said, "Everything is the will of heaven." The Tianhai Divine Empress replied, "We saved him because we wanted to save him. It has nothing to do with whether or not he is our son, nor does it have anything to do with the will of the heavens. Since things have come to this, are you still unwilling to admit defeat? In the end, you don't even know who your real son is, and you dare to fight against the heavenly Tao? You fell into the cycle of the heaven Tao in the end for the sake of saving a young man that was completely unrelated to you, and you were unable to transcend it any longer. Don't you think this is extremely pitiful?" Taoist Ji said, "The heavenly Tao does not need to punish you. As long as you act according to your will, you will be able to reach its goal. The heavenly Tao was in Avakania. You think you're fighting against the heavenly Tao, but you don't know that every time you fight, it's all arranged by the heavenly Tao. Don't you think it's ridiculous?" The Tianhai Divine Empress indifferently said, "If this really is a scheme laid down by the heavenly Tao, have it come and kill me." Taoist Ji said, "The heavenly Tao cannot kill, only humans can kill. You think that you can control everything, but that is not the case. Not in the heavens, not in the mortal world." Just as he finished speaking, a rumble suddenly rang through Jingdo. It was the sound of real wind whistling through the air, threatening to tear one's eardrums apart. The source of the wind was the imperial palace. Even though the Divine Empress had paid an enormous price to help Chen Chongsheng change his fate and was no longer as invincible as she was at her peak, the situation in the capital was still under her control, at least on the surface. The most important reason was that the imperial design had already been activated. Countless dense sword intents broke through the air from various parts of Jingdo, separating and surrounding the heroes of the world who had sneaked into Jingdo. Even those truly peerless experts near the mausoleum of books could not leave. As long as a little more time passed, the murderous intent of the imperial chariot would fully emerge. Other than experts on the level of Taoist Ji, who might be able to safely escape, the rest of the experts would probably all be killed. If they wanted to obtain the final victory in this war, they had to destroy the imperial design before the great Zhou army returned to reinforce the capital. The array pivot of the imperial design was in the imperial palace, where the Lingyan pavilion guarded a heavenly Tao slaughter array. If an expert of the divine domain wanted to charge into the imperial palace, they would suffer the attack of the heavenly slaughter array, their souls extinguished. And those experts below the divine domain simply had no way of breaking into the imperial palace, because the person in charge of the imperial palace was Xue Xingchuan. This was an unbreakable formation within a formation. Besides Xue Xingchuan, the most important person was Liang Wangsun, currently sitting in the pavilion of ascending mist. Liang Wangsun's blood was also imperial blood. Besides the Chern imperial clan, only his soul blood could activate the imperial design. Earlier, Zhu Luo had relied on this point to guess that he was in the imperial palace and let out that angry roar. The pavilion of ascending mist was as bright as day. Liang Wangsun sat in the very center, his eyes tightly shut and his face pale. Fresh blood continuously flowed from between his thumb and forefinger, dripping onto the white sun flame. He heard Zhu Luo's question. Treason? Indeed. This capital was originally the capital of the Liang dynasty. The imperial design had originally been a grand array left behind by the Liang imperial clan. But later on, the capital and the grand array had both been seized by the Qin clan. Now, he had used the blood of the Liang clan to offer up the imperial design to the Qin clan. This truly was an extremely humiliating matter, and it would not be excessive to call it treason. But Liang Wangsun did not care, because he was keenly aware that his enemy was the Qin clan, and he also hated the Qin clan, not that woman surnamed Tianhai. He was willing to do anything that could make the Qin clan suffer, let alone tonight's major event, which was highly likely to sever all the Qin clan's hopes. As long as he could do this, what need was there for him to care about the petty emotions of his ancestors? I'm also surnamed Qin. In the end, I'm still a descendant of the Qin clan. After leaving the little orange garden with his several dozen subordinates, the Prince of Luoyang stealthily avoided the searching imperial guards and the sudden eruption of the imperial design array. Finally, he arrived outside the imperial palace's gate of southern splendor. As he gazed at the majestic imperial palace in the darkness, he untimely thought of his childhood, an expression of nostalgia appearing on his face. Your Highness, now is not the time to be sentimental. Where are we going next? The Prince of Luoyang was roused from his stupor by his somewhat impolite question. Somewhat embarrassed, he rubbed his forehead and said, "Just hide in this garden. Let's not go anywhere else. This place is the safest." Amongst the princes of the Qin clan, the Prince of Luoyang was the weakest in strength, the weakest in temperament, and the weakest in background, so it was naturally impossible for him to recruit any true experts. Those cultivators who dared to follow him into the capital were presumably not heroes with a heart of righteousness. Most of them were ambitious people who wanted to take advantage of the chaos to fight for their lives. At this moment, when they heard the king's words and recalled the king's useless appearance all along the way, some cultivators felt slightly anxious and complained. Only troubled times can produce heroes. If the king doesn't want to stand out, then why bother to come here? With a bitter face, the Prince of Luoyang replied, "This prince didn't dare not come, or else Brother Xiang would kill me." The guards of the prince's estate were well aware of their prince's personality. It was only now that those newly recruited cultivators truly gave up on their thoughts. As he listened to the occasional sounds of fighting and wretched cries on the street, the Prince of Luoyang grew more and more nervous, his face paler and paler. He muttered to himself, "What are they fighting? Mother, if they want to be emperor, just let them be. Those people are all very fierce." At this moment, a man dressed in a blue robe and wearing a spotted tiger mask walked up to his side and said, "Your Highness, it shouldn't be far from the Lingyan Pavilion through the gate of southern splendor, right? The Lingyan Pavilion is very high. If you go down, it shouldn't be far. Hey, I say, what are you doing? Don't mess around. Divine General Shui is very formidable, don't you know?" The Prince of Luoyang looked at the man and uneasily advised him. The man was currently wiping the blade in his hand, paying no attention to what the Prince of Luoyang was saying. But when the Prince of Luoyang asked if he knew, his hand slightly froze. "Your Highness, I want to borrow something from you." "What thing?" "Borrow some blood." After saying this, the masked blue-clothed man raised the blade in his hand and made a cut on the Prince of Luoyang's right arm. Blood instantly gushed out from the cut, and the Prince of Luoyang's face paled in pain. Just when he was about to cry out in pain, he suddenly remembered that no one outside could hear him and hurriedly used his left hand to cover his mouth. The blue-clothed man was just preparing to knock him unconscious so that he wouldn't make a sound, but he hadn't expected this prince to be so afraid of death. He couldn't help but be startled. By the time the guards of the prince's estate and the others heard the commotion and hurried over, the blue-clothed man had already flown over the wall. One of the guards looked out through the glass on the wall and instantly froze. The blue-clothed man charged into the imperial palace. The blue-clothed man was astonishingly fast, even giving off an inhuman feeling. A cloud of dust appeared in front of the imperial city in the darkness, illuminated by the starlight. The man was at the very front of the cloud, so fast that it was impossible to make out his figure. At this sight, a few of the more experienced officers of the Imperial Guard subconsciously recalled that fastest demi-human general in that great war from several hundred years ago. The blue-clothed man was naturally not Jinyu, but he presumably had some connection to the demi-human race. Tonight, the gates of the Imperial Palace were not closed. The blue-clothed man was like a bolt of lightning, heading straight for the Gate of Southern Splendor. There was no one in the Gate of Southern Splendor, only an empty expanse, yet it concealed boundless murderous intent. The blue-clothed man was not surprised. With a roar, he slashed his blade at the distant Lingyan pavilion. The blade in his hand was stained with the Prince of Luoyang's blood. As the blade slashed down, the qi in the imperial palace naturally sensed it and began to transform. Countless rays of golden light appeared out of the void. Was this the heavenly Tao slaughter array? The blue-clothed man had not even stepped into the divine domain, but he was able to rely on the blade in his hand and that smear of imperial blood to force the heavenly Tao slaughter array to reveal itself. His strength was terrifying. Countless rays of golden light condensed into lines that bound the Lingyan pavilion. A few of them, intentionally or unintentionally, drifted across the ground of the imperial palace like fallen leaves blown by the wind. The blue-clothed man exploded with true essence, leaving behind blurs as he charged to the side, but he was unable to avoid those two rays of golden light. With several cracking sounds, the qi in the imperial palace was thrown into chaos. The blue-clothed man had taken out several magical artifacts, but all of them had been shattered. He was still unable to completely avoid the remaining power of the heavenly Tao slaughter array. Countless wounds and bloodstains appeared on his blue robe, and the mask he wore was also shattered, blown to the ground by the wind. It was a face that was both heroic and domineering, covered in fur like steel spikes. It was obvious that he was not an ordinary human, but a demi-human expert in a berserk state. There were not many people in the world who could be so young and also possess such speed. From some place on the imperial city came the shout of a general. Xiao De! Yes, this blue-clothed man who had charged straight into the imperial palace was the strongest of the younger generation of demi-humans, the fifth-ranked Xiao De of the Proclamation of Liberation. This demi-human expert had an extremely resounding reputation in the world, yet he was unable to change the mood of the crowd. Because this was the Great Zhou Imperial Palace. Accompanied by countless low buzzing sounds, countless soldiers vaguely appeared in the surroundings of the imperial city, forming a dense black mass. The bolts of the divine crossbows reflected a devouring luster in the pitch-black darkness. The center of the imperial palace was still empty, with only Xiao De. Even if you are the fifth-ranked expert of the Proclamation of Liberation, daring to charge into the Great Zhou Imperial Palace will still result in death. Seeing the divine crossbows in the darkness, sensing the terrifying qi of the heavenly Tao slaughter array that was gradually fading away, Xiao De did not hesitate, abandon the blade. Kneel. Raise the hand. Yell. I surrender. Descending was a word with many sounds. It could mean surrender, but it could also mean descent. The demi-human expert Xiao De faced the countless divine crossbows of the great Zhou dynasty without hesitation and shouted surrender. Thus, the person in the night sky began to descend. All the experts of the divine domain that could control the wind were in the mausoleum of Book. If the immortal birds and strange beasts of the various sects dared to appear in the sky of the capital tonight, they would assuredly be shot to death or pursued by a flock of red falcons. Who was flying in the night sky? It was a very large kite. The kite flapped in the wind. There was a string under the kite, and on the other end of the string was a person. This person's face was covered by a piece of white paper, which also flapped in the wind. 3 holes had been dug into this white paper, making it seem rather terrifying. Second, on the proclamation of liberation, painted armor Xiao Zhang. He jumped down from the sky. He dodged the golden lines of light that Xiaoda had just forced out, and like a meteor, he smashed into the Lingyan pavilion,